Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the EESC for the public hearing this morning and then the working group this afternoon on regenerative agriculture and the objective for sustainable agriculture and sustainable food production, supporting the climate and biodiversity objectives. I am replacing my colleague Josep, who will be a little bit late, so I will be here chairing the meeting, and you'll be able to listen to my jokes, some of which are less funny than others. But I'd like to greet everybody in the room, everybody online, the rapporteur, Stoyan Chukhanov, his advisor, Simon Kramer, and our other colleagues who I can see, some of whom are in the room. Casper, you're in the room. Mathieu Courgeot, Liana Girard, and others. I wanted to thank the interpreters for making our work easier. Thank you, sir. You can speak in English, French, Italian, and Spanish, and listen in those 4 languages as well. We have the youth representative here, Doris. I think she's online. She is from the Slovenian rural youth movement. In a moment, I'm going to give the floor to our speakers. Eric Mathis will be the first speaker. He's a professor in agricultural economics at the University of Leuven. I said that in a very French way, says Arnold. He is going to talk about opportunities for carbon farming and regenerative farming in Europe. You have 8 minutes, sir, with a presentation to accompany it. Over to you.
Thank you for the invitation. So yes, I'm a professor of agricultural economics. Yes, it's working now? Okay. I'm also coordinating a European Horizon project called Soil Values, which is looking for the business models behind soil health. It's interesting, actually, because in the call text, the word regenerative agriculture was not present. And we had a big debate whether we should use the term or not. And actually, our consortium is split into 2. Whether or not we should actually already use the word. And from a social science point of view, it's like, well, let's use the word and let's see what the different stakeholders, how they define it, right? So it's very much a topic in development. Because we are just talking about the economics of soil health-based business models, right? And I think we will see throughout the session that, of course, there's a lot of overlap with the concept of regenerative agriculture. I would like to start with 2 statements from my perspective. One statement is that for me, as an economist, the essence of regenerative farming is the reducing risk. It's a risk management reduction strategy. And why is that important? Because the main strategy of the economic operators in the food system is to transfer risk. Yeah, it's to diversify, it's to hedge, it's to transfer risk around, but not to reduce risk. And that's very essential. It's about reducing losses. It's about prevention, right? Rather than dealing with risks as post. I think it's a very essential element of regenerative farming. And my second statement is, I think there is an increasing consensus about it, is that carbon farming, focusing only on carbon, is not a viable business model. So only focusing on carbon, it's not enough. I think there is an increasing consensus that what is called the co-benefits, the other ecosystem services, are actually as important and maybe even more important than carbon farming as such. Why? Well, because the amount of carbon that you can sequester in the soil, at least from a scientific point of view, is relatively limited, and of course levels off, right? So the delta that you can add onto it will level off. And of course the price of carbon is not high enough to really, and it depends of course on the context. You can imagine with a gross margin in the Netherlands of, I don't know, 6,000 euros per hectare, it's a different situation than, somewhere in the south or in the east of Europe where a gross margin is maybe only 1,000 euro per hectare. Okay, so my 2 slides, my first slide, I would like to focus on a couple of what I think are essential elements of what I call the promises and especially the challenges, and there are some other people in the room who can talk much more about the essence of regenerative agriculture. For me, the essence is to increase soil organic matter in the soil and keep it there. For me, that's the essence of regenerative agriculture. Keeping it there by keeping the soil covered with cover crops, with mulching, whatever it works in a certain context, and not plowing the way that we are used to plow, which is inversive plowing, but rather have reduced tillage, no tillage, or non-inversive tillage, right? So keep the organic matter in the soil as much as we can. And also increase crop diversification, especially including legumes, because in this way we not only increase the organic matter in the soil, but we can also get nitrogen out of the air. And then as a last point, and this is already, I think, a point of controversy, farmers can reduce inputs. And inputs, I mean mineral fertilizers, pesticides. It's already a matter of because if you reduce inputs, don't you reduce outputs? Is yield? So is actually the increase of is the enhanced soil structure, the enhanced soil biodiversity, the fixation of nitrogen and all the other elements, are these all enough to actually substitute for the reduction of, for example, mineral fertilizer and pesticide reduction? It's I think scientifically at least, still an open question. You can see the theory of change. Increasing soil organic matter leads to better soil structure, increased soil biodiversity, means more stable yields, more ecosystem services like water retention. And we know that in the western of Europe it means slowing down water. And in Eastern Europe, the report came out yesterday, it means keeping water as much because there's less water. Reduced pollution, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and ultimately, hopefully, also reduced costs. Now you can see 6 solid challenges that I've put here. One is where does the organic matter have to come from? I'm living in a country where we have loads of organic matter in the form of pig slurry, but that's probably not the kind of organic matter we want for regenerative agriculture. I think farmland manure would be much better, or compost. But the supply of that, if you scale it up, and I'm talking about scaled up, I'm not talking about pioneering, because on a pioneering level you can get the biomass from several sources, but if you scale up, where does the biomass have to come from? It's not so straightforward, because we don't close our loops. Secondly, there's this transition period that farmers have to face. We saw it in organic, and it's still an open question how much that transition period will take. Transition period means that your income will go down before it may go up again. People are talking about 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. The only scientific study I saw of a long-term experiment with reduced tillage and cover crops on the Kellogg's experimental farm had a break-even after 17 years, 17. Yeah. Of course, it depends on the conditions. It depends on the incentives. You can, of course, accelerate, keep it smaller, but you have that transition period to take into account. Very important, off-taker arrangements. If you increase crop diversification, if you include legumes in your rotation, and if you're not using those legumes for your own feed production, but for example, as an arable farmer, you have to sell it, well, it's a big risk actually. So we're reducing one risk, but you're increasing market risk because there may not be a market for these new legumes. So if you don't have a contract with an off-taker, you actually increase market risk as a regenerative farmer. So it's a very important element to make it work. There's also a land user, land owner coordination. Where the land user is the landowner is no problem, but of course, as a land user, will I invest in soil which is not my soil? It's an issue, of course. That is very member state dependent because of different tenure arrangements. There's also the issue of high financial value of land, which has nothing to do with soil fertility, like in Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and so on. That also may be a barrier. And of course, there is still a big problem of measuring outcomes. Second slide is that I would like to present 5 different perspectives, and I'm sure that these 5 perspectives more or less will be talked about today. They are overlapping, they are kind of complementary. This is different ways of talking about regenerative agriculture or soil health in general. One is soil as an economic asset, as a productive asset. So the idea is that you increase your return to that asset by investing in it, and that you can get a higher reward from that. And there, of course, there is a problem if you reduce your costs. Okay, that's one way of getting a return. But you know what happens with your revenues? If you don't have a market reward, will it really be generating enough revenue to be able to invest in soil as a productive capital asset? The second element, the second perspective, is that the fact that your soil is not only benefiting you as a farmer, but it's also benefiting others. In the supply chain, society as a whole, by offering ecosystem services, water retention, carbon sequestration, biodiversity, and so on. Which means that there is a public benefit for which there is a public reward possible, a payment for ecosystem services, for example. And also carbon farming would qualify in that. And as you know, there is basically two ways of getting payment, which is either by earning carbon credits, which is probably the relatively expensive way because you need to have it credited with an expensive MRV system, or by insetting, by having your supply chain off-takers paying a premium for that. A third one, very important, I started with that, is risk mitigation. It's the protective value of soil, its on-farm risk management strategy against especially weather issues. But it also is interesting for other players in the system. Think about insurance companies that may have to pay out lower amounts because there are, a crop insurance, because, there's more stable yields, right? So they're interested in this. They may be offering lower insurance premiums. Or banks, maybe the risk of default is lower. So banks are interested in this. And of course also food processing companies that are very much worried about supply chain disruptions. Bad weather, oops, no potatoes, what should we do? So they're also interested in it. I think a very important challenge is many people will benefit, but they should be shared. But the cost should be shared, and this is, I think, one of the big challenges. One of the challenges not the farmer should pay all the costs, and everybody should benefit, but that there should be a cost sharing perspective, which leads me to the fourth perspective, which is a social innovation. Basically, regenerative agriculture should be about empowering farmers. Yeah, empowering farmers, not just, which means that they keep control over what they're doing, right? I think the data issue is a very interesting issue where the farmer, in principle, is the owner of the data that he's generating on his farm, but there's all kinds of operators in the chain that are claiming that data. So is it really empowering the farmer, or is it empowering others that are making a business model out of that data? So the same thing should be here, and I would like to end with actually a perspective which we hardly ever talk about, which is the intrinsic value of nature. We should not only care about nature and biodiversity just because it's good for us humans, but because it has intrinsic value. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Professeur.
Thank you very much, Professor. If I understood correctly, you said that it takes 17 years to achieve a new carbon balance, a financial balance.
I know about that. Can I?
Vas-y.
That's research done by the Michigan University and also with Utah University, and they did the research how long it takes in order to get the same yield from the same place, the same farmer, if you're using a no-tilt or strip-tilt practices. And that's the one that you're referring to. All right, it's not in general, because in the regenerative agriculture we have a different type of farming. So that's why it's, but we'll get to this later on. Thank you.
Et donc, cette référence.
So this reference to 17 years in order to achieve a financial balance is very relevant, because the next speaker, Jana Epperlein, who is online, she is the Vice President of the European Association of Conservation Agriculture. And conservation tillage as well. And she has been practicing this technique for 17 years in Germany. So, Jana, you have 8 minutes and you have slides. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. And thank you also for the opportunity to briefly present some key points of our joint study on conservation agriculture in Germany. As you said, I'm working for the German Association of Conservation Tillage. It's a farmer-based organization. And next one, please. Agriculture is facing major challenges, like you heard, climate change, loss of biodiversity, stagnating yields and high input costs. Conservation agriculture and regenerative agriculture provides a sustainable solution by minimizing soil disturbance, permanent soil cover, and diverse crop rotation. And these approaches help to regenerate soils, reduce emissions, protect nature, and increase the resilience of agriculture. Next, please. The study that we carry out by NABU, it's a nature conservation organization in cooperation with our farmer-based organization, the GKB, and the University Weinstefan Triesdorf of Applied Science, is based on 70 sample farms in 4 soil climatic regions of Germany that have already been used conservation agriculture for several years. This analysis focused on the main crops in arable farming, practice winter wheat, winter oilseed rape, maize, and winter barley. With regard to the selected crops, the most important operating parameters of plant protection inputs, nitrogen fertilization, fuel, soil health, and yield were analyzed and subsequently evaluated. In order to take regional differences and agronomic diversity into account and to be able to compare these results, the farmers were clustered according to their geographical, like you see here, location, soils and climate characteristic, and regional specific comparative data and agricultural consultancy was used. Next, please. And here you see the short results in some slides. And there are currently many different indicators and approaches for measuring the risk and toxicity of plant protection products. The common indicators for the use of plant protection products, such as the treatment index, provide information on the quantity and intensity of applications but are unsuitable for evaluating the effectiveness of risk minimization measures. In this study, what we used is the pesticide load index, and this index was served as the basis for taxation of pesticides in Denmark since 2013 and is based on the potential risk management. In this figure on this slide, it's shown the reduction of toxicity caused by plant protection products in conservation agriculture compared to conventional agriculture in 4 crops. The analysis shows the significant saving in pesticides overall. Toxicity was reduced up to 71% in the farm investigated. On average, across all crops, toxicity was reduced by up to 52% compared to conventional application patterns. Particularly striking results of the analysis is a significant reduction of herbicide toxicity in the crops analyzed, especially in winter wheat, in winter oilseed rape, and also in winter barley. The results also show a significant reduction in the use of fungicides and insecticides in conservation agriculture in these farms. Fungicide toxicity was reduced in winter wheat by 62%, in winter oilseed rape by 72%, and in winter barley by 79%. No fungicide were used in maize, which is why there was no reduction here. The use of insecticides shows a similar picture, and in winter oilseed rape, a significant reduction of over 80% was observed. Next, please. And also what we take in account was how it was the development of the nitrogen use and also the reduction in the consumption of nitrogen. And this analysis shows a significant reduction in nitrogen consumption in conservation agriculture compared to the conventional variant. Across all crops of nitrogen was used 15%. Particularly significant savings were recorded for winter wheat and also winter barley and also winter oilseed rape by 9%. Next, please. And we also take soil samples in these 70 farms, and this was the results, and the microbial performance index used by BioTrack summarized various aspects of microbial activity in single easily interpretable value, and it enables the comparison of soils from different locations and soil types and provide a solid basis for assessing soil functionality and biodiversity. And the results shows that the microbial performance in these analyzed soils under conservation agriculture was significant higher than in sampled conventional farmed. Next, please. And now some slides regarding the yields. And the results showed that the yields in conservation agriculture system are generally more stable and in many cases even higher than in conventional farming system. And it's particularly striking that CA areas show better yield performance in years with extreme weather conditions, such as prolonged dry periods. Crops such as winter wheat and maize shows a significant increase in yields, but however, the yields effects are highly depend on the region and also on the respective crop. Next, please. That was very interesting then because the transition from conventional farming to conservation agriculture is complex and highly context-specific process that harbors both challenges and immense opportunities. This transition path, the transition from intensive, resource-intensive forms of farming to resource conserving and more sustainable practices requires a careful planning and a gradual adaptation of farming methods and farm structures. based on expert interviews with the participating farmers of our study, it illustrated how quickly various inputs can be reduced and how yields can stabilize and even improve over the time. These examples of the transition pathway offers values insights into the dynamics of conversion. Next, please. And this is a summary from our study. The results show that if you switch from CA, offers both ecological and economic benefits, up to 75% less fuel consumption, up to 20% less fertilizer, because the farms switch from normal fertilization into maybe coltan fertilization, and also up to 70% lower ecological and healthy risk from pesticides, and up to 60% higher contribution margin per hectare and year. At the same time, you improve soil health, strengthen biodiversity, and soil fertility. And this study was published in March in German and will be also be available soon in English language. Thank you very much.
Merci, Yana. Ça semble.
Thank you, Jana. Well, this does seem very interesting indeed, and you've given us a lot of interesting figures. Let me hand over now to Daniel Sacristan, Associate Professor at the University of Valencia in Spain. And he's going to be talking about the results of a study on Spanish regenerative farms. You have 8 minutes, and you have your slides there as well.
We see you. Je vous vois.
I can see you.
Good morning. Sorry for this. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for giving us the chance, me and the ARA, to present this study that has been conducted along with different institutions and organizations that tries to show like an innovative approach to how let's say agroecosystem should be analyzed. All right. I will be sharing my presentation now. All right. Just give me a second. You can see it now, no?
Yes, it's on the screen.
All right, thank you. Well, this is, again, thank you for giving us the chance to present the study that we are carrying out right now between ERA and different institutions that you will see later on in the slides. And it's a like really innovative and pioneer approach towards how agroecosystem performance can be analyzed. All right. So first of all, it's important to, well, some of you maybe already know, but first of all, I wanted just to let you know what the ERA means or stands for. And the ERA is the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, which is an independent farmer-led coordination, advocacy, and action organization of the movement of regenerative agriculture. But I'm not going to explain in detail this because I've got a colleague of mine, Megan Sapp, which later on will give you further details on what the ERA is and further things, no? So based on the ERA's policy paper, you can see right here, no? This farmer-led study, let's say this way, pioneers epistemological and methodological innovation, showing the results of European pioneers' productivity through a simple, robust, and measurable index called the regenerative product. All right. Basically, this study, what it does, it puts regenerative farmers in the center of the process, and at the same time, what it does is, let's say, supports through empirical data an innovative approach to a transformation, all right? Giving it a chance to use, let's say, other ways and other indicators to actually, let's say, value what it's been doing in the agro ecosystem. And at the same time, since it's been conducted through a farmer-led organization and with the help and information from actual farmers, it gives evidence on the power of this regenerative productivity index and value, since it actually uses to assess and analyze the performance of the farmer. All right. Basically, the main goals of this study are the ones you can see there. Basically, you're trying to validate what it can be produced with less using this productivity factor I already mentioned. It actually proves that this factor can be measurable in a very robust and simple way. It also tests that it can be used for CAP purposes, all right? It enables public and private currents and let's say that catalyzes farmer capacity building, all right, and empowers, following some of the ideas laid by Eric, empowers the farmers. As you can see, there's a big consortium of different institutions and organizations that are working along with this, and I include myself as the Universidad de Valencia here. And basically, with this study, what it does is based on different key performance indicators, actually helps to measure and manage the transition towards these regenerating agronomic practices. All right, and it actually provides farm management information, and it measured performance both in an economical and an ecological way. And this helps, let's say, to broaden the area that actually can be looked at when you're actually looking for agro-ecosystem performance. From a methodological point of view, the aims of the study, what they actually want to do is document farmer innovation through this comprehensive productivity index. They want to compare this regeneration productivity to context-specific average farmers, so they can actually be, let's say, social and scientifically sound, and they can actually be compared. And at the same time, sometimes science and these things can get quite complicated. So it's trying to find a way, a simple and robust way you can actually measure this performance, through this regenerative productivity. And to do so, it basically these aims are fulfilled through using different key context-specific indicators. So you can see in this slide. From one side, we've got these remote sense indicators based on whole year photosynthesis and soil cover, which at the same time, I'm going along with some of the regenerative statements set here. Again, Eric talked about soil cover. And at the same time, well, you can actually use other indirect remote sense indicators like ecosystem structure and phenology, or some other aspects like evapotranspiration or water use efficiency. And this goes along with, let's say, different on-spot measurements that are done by the farmers that you can see here and concern yields in terms of plant production and animal production. But at the same time, it leads it relates to this data is linked to fuel consumption, energy consumption, water consumption, and linked to crop protection and nutrient use. All right. So basically, when we put all this together, we ended up getting some interesting results. No, it's true that we're still going through we're doing some of the research. I include myself. I'm reaching more farmers to actually pack better the information and get like a more robust number of farmers sampled. But this study involves like a big amount of countries in Europe, which includes Spain, Portugal, Greece, Germany, or Finland. And this latter, Finland, is one of the within us is one of the countries that has gone further and has already generated quite impressive results, as you can see here in this slide. The different pioneer farmers have been consulted to share their performance regarding some of the key indicators I have already mentioned before. So we're sharing here like inputs regarding nutrition for the crop nutrition, etc., and consumption on pesticides and fuel, and at the same time comparing getting results or gathering results regarding yields on the different crops used. And this, what it's done is basically it's compared to average farmers in a context-specific region, and regarding it's the same pedoclimatic region and land use category, and at the same time we're using using the utilized agricultural area as a spatial reference. And this is just a summary of like the processing of the results for Finland. And as you can see, up until now, with the farmers consulted, they've performed pretty impressively. If you see here, there's this crops, barley, oats, and all this group of crops included in this analysis. More than an extra 36% of the area compared to the average was under organic practices. And if you can see, there's like massive improvement in gross margin, and there's quite an impressive amount on statistical autonomy linked to the reduced inputs on the farm. And at the same time, it's analyzed how this agroecosystem is performed, not only through this let's say this empirical way on inputs and outputs, but at the same time we're bearing in mind the ecosystems that these agroecosystems give us, and through measuring water and aspects linked to climate change or carbon sequestration on biodiversity. And as you can see, along with this data, we've put in practice this regenerative total factor productivity, which is the index I've already spoke about. And it looks as though they're performing pretty well. And at the same time, if we contrast this data with our CAP purposes, actually in Finland they're doing pretty well with an extra 14.5%. And it's really interesting to check how these pioneer farmers are, let's say, increasing the services that they can actually give to the society. And just checking on two of the key indicators, which was the whole year photosynthesis and the soil cover. You can see which these two indicators have a different, different consequences on other ecosystem services and the performance of the farm. You can see that regenerative farmers are doing much better than the average. All right, and as a summary for Europe, up until now, not all of us are actually at the same spot, but until now, from what it has been analyzed, this is what it's looking like. So the regenerative total factor productivity, it's certainly increasing, considering how things are done and how the ecosystems are contributing to actually improve these services and the ecosystems in general. And at the same time, it looks like it's, basically using CAP measurements. This regenerative agriculture is also performing better, considering aspects like, for example, soil cover. And so basically that is what I wanted to say, and this is up to what we've done up until now with this YARA study. So thank you very much for the time.
Merci beaucoup, Daniel. Maintenant,
Thank you very much, Daniel. We now have time for questions for our speakers. Who'd like to break the ice?
s'il n'y a pas de question. Ah, Andreas.
Andreas?
Eric. Oh, Andreas. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arnold. That was a bit quick now. But indeed, I have some questions. Maybe a general one, and to Professor Eric Matthijs on sustainable agriculture versus regenerative agriculture. Can we really distinguish what is the difference? And I think this goes then in the end, this is a question we need to tackle with our opinion in the end. Is regenerative agriculture a precondition to talk about the sustainable agriculture? So this is a tricky question I think we will need to develop throughout the opinion. Then on, because like if we understand that regenerative agriculture means that we would like to re-establish a certain condition of the soil, if the soil is the main topic, then it means that something has to be already in a bad condition. Then we need regenerative agriculture to come back on a good condition, and then we continue with sustainable forms of agriculture to keep the condition. Because as you referred to the situation that if we look at the organic matter content, for instance, there is a kind of a ceiling. You cannot actually increase the organic matter content even further in terms of capturing carbon, for instance. So once your soil is in a top condition, you would aim to keep it in this condition. And then actually it's more about sustainability in relation or instead of regeneration forms of agriculture. Then to Janne Eppelein on conservation agriculture, like the outcome or the findings, they look very promising. So less insecticides, less fuels, less nitrogen, higher yields. So why wouldn't all farmers follow this pathway? What are the caveats here? Is it investments in machinery? Is it higher workload? And especially the fact that the use of insecticides in rapeseed was reduced significantly by 70% in compared to conventional farming. What was exactly the reason for this outcome? If you have this information, thank you.
Merci, Andreas.
Thank you, Andreas.
If I may, I'll say two things. And the second thing is also a question back to my colleagues, which actually refers to your second question as well. So the first question on definition, there is no consensus in the scientific literature on this issue. There's a lot of criticism on regenerative agriculture as well. Ken Giller, for example, from Wageningen University, is a famous criticist. Is like, what is this all about? And I think you can also trace it back to the fact that, I don't know whether you're familiar with the term sustainable versus ecological intensification. So the question is how to reach sustainable agriculture. I see this as a pathway of ecological intensification. So you're using natural processes as a way to increase sustainability. Whereas sustainable intensification, which is using genetically modified organisms, precision agriculture, is using more technological means to reach sustainability, right? But in the end, of course, the level of your indicators will be different. There will be trade-offs. obviously in ecological intensification you will have more biodiversity, which you will have less in sustainable intensification, right? So there are different shades of sustainability, if you like. But to define sustainable agriculture is, I think, also quite difficult because there are these different pathways, I think. But secondly, and I think that's an important point, which is also a question back. I mean, you all referred to there is a reduction of pesticide use of so much percentage. So strictly speaking, you cannot say that because statistically that's not correct. And that's why I referred to this Michigan study, because there you have a control and you have a treatment. Yeah, and the conditions are the same. And you're comparing things, you're comparing on farm, the conventional and the regenerative variant, right? Because, these farmers, they may have, that are performing better than the average. I'm not saying that they're not performing better than the average. They are, obviously, because that's what we're measuring. But maybe they were already performing better to begin with. Yeah, maybe initially they already used less pesticides, or less, so to what extent has this been taken into account? Is my question, because that's the only way. Because if you say these are 35% better than the others, you cannot. And this is they are better farmers to begin with, which they probably are. You cannot just translate that to the rest of the farmer population. So if those pioneers can reduce 35% of something, it doesn't mean that the rest will reduce with 35%, because they're different farmers with different conditions. And of course, you try to take into account as much as you can the other conditions, but we call that in statistics self-selection bias, right? So it's not a correct comparison. So that's a big concern. So in scientific literature, that would not be accepted. And if you look at review studies, that typically will only select those studies that have a correct control. And if you don't have a correct control, it's scientifically not accepted. And it's a big challenge, because it means that we need experiments also on farm, where a farmer is doing regenerative agriculture and conventional at the same time, for example. Yeah. Or you look at things because that's very difficult to do, or you take into account the initial condition of the farmer. Yeah, so the initial situation. So you look at, so has this farmer actually reduced pesticide use on farm by 35%? Yeah, so maybe he uses 35% less than the average, but he on farm also reduced his pesticides with 35%. That's two different things.
Piroshka, no?
Piroshka?
Maria Nicolopoulou.
Maria Nicolopoulou.
Bonjour, buenos días. I will speak in Spanish. Buenos días a todas y a todos. Lo siento.
Well, good morning, everyone. I do apologize. There was an issue with my flight, which meant I wasn't able to make it to Brussels today. Just a question from me, and I'm certainly no expert on this, but learning a lot as ever. I have a question for Daniel, just on the indicators that you mentioned. These indicators, are they specific to regenerative agriculture? Or are these indicators that could point to data that could be extracted from other types of agriculture, conventional farming, for instance? And if these indicators aren't specific, which could lead to confusion, are there any thresholds, any limits that are being looked at to try and really pinpoint the results that we're getting from regenerative agriculture as opposed to conventional farming? Thank you.
Andreas voulait ajouter un mot.
Andreas, did you want to come back?
Just on the indicators, this was a key word. Can I add a question? You were explaining, the colleague from IARA was explaining that you were looking into a photosynthesis indicator and a soil cover indicator. Why do you need both indicators? Aren't they showing the same, in the end, the same result? It means the soil is covered and there's photosynthesis. Thank you.
Qui est-ce qui veut répondre?
Who would like to answer?
Yana?
Jana?
Christian?
Christian?
Non. Poser un problème, c'est commencer à y répondre.
Now I can.
Okay.
I couldn't connect. Sorry there. Well, to the first question from Maria. Maria, I'll speak in Spanish, all right? And then I'll answer in English to Andreas. No, los indicadores no son específicos de.
We don't have specific indicators. These are Eurostat values that we use so that they can be comparable, so we don't have specific indicators for regenerative agriculture. But this data is compared against average agriculture figures per country, and we have different scales of the crops per country in Europe, and we can use these, and our source of information to create the averages from Eurostat. And these are easily accessible data. Everybody can access this data.
To Andreas, the fact that it's not the same as having the soil cover, because that's how much space is being covered, and at the same time you're doing with the photosynthesis where you're doing performance. So at the same time you're actually measuring how good the crop is doing. Let's say if you take soil crops, it's not measuring you. One is measuring how much space is being occupied by this cover crop, and at the same time you're doing performance. All right. So indirectly you're measuring other things like biomass and state of the plant. You can reach deficiencies. So yeah, it's different sets of information.
Merci, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. Lutz, please.
Yeah, thank you, Arnold. Sorry for my limited English, but I have a question mainly to you, Erik. The committee here is not a scientific body. We are more or less a political body, and we have to give messages to the politicians based on scientific work. So, if I understand right, your approach is to say we have a problem with the soil, with the structure of the soil, in many, many, many cases in agriculture. And we need to get a better structure, enhance soil structure and increase soil biodiversity. It was one on your. What do you think, what should be the main message, in our opinion? First, I think we have to describe where the problem is. Do we have really a problem in agriculture, yes or no? And I think we have a huge problem. I'm coming from the environmental movement, and by accident, really by accident, yesterday evening, there was a report in the German television program, a regional program, about soil erosion on the sandy soil in eastern Germany, where we have huge fields, 150, 200 hectares. The wind is blowing, and farmers start to understand that they have a problem, and they start to react with regenerative agriculture. So, what should be the main message to the politicians? This is one question. The second question was raised by Andreas, but there was no answer on. If this kind of agriculture, regenerative agriculture, conservation agriculture, resource, extensive farming, whatever you would like to call it, if it's so good for the farmers and and for the society, the question is, why are there such a little amount of farmers doing practices like that? There is an observation from my side. The information services given to the farmers was, in former times, many, many years ago, it was a bit state-run, and a lot of advice came from state-owned companies and advisory services. Nowadays, it's a business sector, and the chemical industry and tractor companies and so on and so on. They said, whatever your soil needs, you can buy it. You can buy that. Is this one of the problems? Is there not enough education, let's say education for the farmers?
Yes, thank you. Two big questions. I think for the first one, you can refer to the Commission's publications from the JRC, for example, on soil degradation, which actually is different in different countries. For example, in my country, it's mainly a problem of soil sealing. You know, the fact that water cannot move away because of the heavy machinery. In other countries, it's. I mean, obviously, if you have deep soils, your problems are different than you have shallow soils on slopes. I mean, it's a very different set of issues depending also on the soil type. But I think soil erosion, especially also in southern Europe, is really a really big problem. So I think that there is, more than enough evidence to support that. And so the big message is, especially with the current situation and focus on food security, is that it's our insurance, it's our main capital, and we need to make sure that we keep it in good shape. And and not doing that is a big risk, adding to all the other risks that we have in Europe. So I think that should be the main message as far as I'm concerned. To the other questions, there are many barriers, many. Actually, my colleague Philippe Barret from UC Louvain, University Catholique de Louvain, has released a report yesterday based on 9 European projects on crop diversification. And I can't remember exactly how many, but it's like 40 or 50 types of barriers that farmers are facing in making the transition. And this is on crop diversification only. Yeah. So there is also barriers related to other ways of tillage and so on and so on. So there are many barriers, ranging from legal barriers to economic barriers to types of machinery barriers, access to finance barriers. I mean, there's so many different elements. They're also different in different member states again, right? Because access to finance, for example, in my country is less of a problem than, for example, in Bulgaria. To take one example, sorry, or Romania, No, because there is a report of the Commission that has indicated the finance needs by member states, right? And finance needs are much smaller in the Netherlands and Denmark and Belgium than they are in many in Romania or Italy or Spain, right? Or Bulgaria. But this is just, finance issues, and an important issue. If I look at farmers, I'm living in a village where I can't find any regenerative farming. It's because it's a different mindset. It means thinking differently about systems, and it's more difficult. It's so easy just to plow that field, put my fertilizers on there. Put the glyphosate in there. It's much easier. It's much less demanding for the farmer, and you still get his revenue. Honestly, so don't underestimate the easiness of conventional farming. And whether or not this is reinforced by private industry, I think is even a minor issue. Because yes, we need independent advice, and I think it's for the Commission, it's a very important issue that we have independent advice. And actually, getting subsidies, farmers can get subsidies to get access to advice. The independence of the advisory services is actually is a condition. So that's certainly an issue. But I think in that respect, yes, of course, private industry will sell its products, but I think also private industry is interested in moving towards sustainability because ultimately they're also changing their portfolio of products. They're also realizing that we cannot continue the way we are. So there is also innovations there. But I mean, so basically many barriers, hundreds of barriers. And I think an important one is this, easiness of doing things the way that we've been doing things before, the mental mindset, which is very important.
Joseph Pouchou.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Thank you very much for this information. Based on what Lutz has also said, if you wouldn't mind, Chair, I have two questions. If there aren't many farmers using regenerative agriculture at the moment, it's maybe because it's at its infancy, and maybe we need to explain it better. Let me simplify matters. It seems to me that a few years ago, when we were talking about organic farming, there was a lot of interest in certification and promoting this idea of integrated agriculture, which was basically a list of best practices. I remember that in the 90s, in the last century, integrated agriculture, which was doing agriculture well, was quite close to conventional agriculture. The idea was not to contaminate soils and water, etc., etc. And I think we're looking at this from a European perspective. Although I think we need to really apply this at the local level because there are huge differences. And in the past, we've made the error of trying to have a one-size-fits-all strategy without making the distinction between lands that receive more than 1,000 millimeters of water per year, some that only get 400 milliliters of water a year, or the different types of crops that can be cultivated, or crops such as almonds, for example, that grow in dry areas, and areas where we don't cultivate at certain times of the year. For example, we don't sow in spring or in autumn, and this allows the soils to regenerate, etc., etc. But now let's get back to the nub of the subject here. We have directives on soils and on water, which are important, and we need to work to ensure that they are actually respected. And we have a European map now that sets out the situation here in Europe, and we have poor soils in some areas. Now, we're not in Ecuador, we're not in the Amazon, we're not in areas where our soils have been, we're not in areas where soils have been cultivated for millennia and need regeneration. Regenerative agriculture should be promoted not just for best practices, but so that we comply with the soil and the water directives, so that we minimize the inputs. All of this should be how the majority of farmers farm. That's what Lutz was saying as well. We need to explain it well, and we need to make it mainstream. But we need to take into account the errors we've made in the past. It's impossible to have a one-size-fits-all solution for the entire European Union. We need to do it on a one-to-one scale. We need to take into account the agronomic realities of each area, because we have poor soils, we have contaminated water tables. These are situations that we can manage, and we need to find a way to drive this regenerative agriculture so that it becomes the standard model of agriculture in the European Union. I don't agree that an environmentally sound agricultural system should mean lower income for farmers. I don't agree with that. In the medium term, at least, it's better for farmers to farm like this. If we do things well, we'll always get good results. If we have to always act in an emergency situation in order to try and save this year's harvest, then this isn't a benefit to anybody. When we have problems, we use a lot of plant phytosanitary products, whereas we could be using pheromones, for example, instead of these products. And this would allow us to save money and would ensure that there is no pesticide contamination. There are lots of techniques like this that we could use. And this is what I think that the own initiative opinion that Stoyan has produced should it's already focused on that, but we need to go further towards it. We need to look at water and soils and how regenerative agriculture can become the conventional form of agriculture in the medium term in the European Union. And so that and I think this is feasible for our farmers. Thank you.
Oui, on a un autre panel, mais là, je suis obligé de laisser quand même parler.
I have to let Maurizio take the floor. This is Roman wisdom. That's very kind of you. I'm going to speak in Italian.
Oui. Alla luce di...
Based on what I've heard this morning and what has been said in our study group and what Josef has just said and the other colleagues, there is one thing that I think is absolutely crucial here. If we don't repeat the errors of the past, this regenerative agriculture has to be clearly defined, and the definition needs to be established by farmers and the establishment. Farmers cannot be expected to be subject to what has been decided above them. It's absolutely crucial so that we don't. Now I'm saying this. We mustn't only think in terms of what is good for the multinationals and not what is good for the farmers. We need to think about what is good for the general interest of the entire continent. I have heard arguments in favor of regenerative agriculture, but I think that the farmers involved in this need to be able to contribute to the crucial questions of how to develop a more sustainable agricultural system. I heard the former Secretary of State from Spain, but more than anything, he is a farmer. And when he says these things, it has a different weight than if it was said by somebody else. And the future of the common agricultural policy, which is what we're looking at here, Chair, who is the future president of NAT, should include concrete tools to accompany this transition, because This includes training, knowledge, capacity building. This is what we need. We need to all work together in order to have a serious response to a serious question so that we can all make progress together. Thank you. Thank you, Maurizio. Thank you for your wisdom. I'm glad that you're here with us in this meeting. Now, I'm going to give the floor to Kiroshka, who is going to chair the next panel. I don't think that we need to answer immediately what you've just said, but it was important that it was said. So now I'm going to thank our first speakers, Professor Matisse, who came here from his university. He has struggled through the traffic jams in Brussels, although it is quieter here in Brussels because it's the school holidays.
Monsieur le Président.
It's my great pleasure to moderate this panel. Also because what Maurizio has requested before is going to be debated, I'm sure, in this panel. And let me say just some word that I have read the opinion of Stoyan, in which the civil society organizations, so the organized civil society organizations on behalf of the ESC has already a very good proposal for the definition of regenerative agriculture. But we will speak about that, I'm sure. But without more delay, I'm going to give the floor to Megan Sepp, Advocacy and External Relations Director, the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, and she's going to introduce us how to enable the transformation of agri-food systems through accountable ecologic, economic, and social regeneration. So, Ms. Sepp, the floor is yours. You've got 8 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the invitation today. It's great that Danielle has already gone and shared some of the results from our pilot study that I had thought to share at the end. So I will use those minutes in a different way. Can you please move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So we as IARA, as the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, are a farmer-led organization bringing together more than 70, now we're almost more than 80 farmers from across Europe, more than 20 different countries, all in different kinds of contexts, different kinds of regenerating forms of agriculture. I myself, in addition to being the Advocacy and External Relations Director of IARA, I'm also a regenerative farmer in northern Spain. I teach farmers regenerative agriculture. I do advisory for farmers and for companies, and I do ecological outcome verification monitoring on farms. So I look forward to taking a few moments to help clarify maybe some of the questions that were asked by members earlier. Next slide, please. So we as IARA, what we try to do is to enable the transformation of agri-food ecosystems through accountable ecologic, economic, and social regeneration. I think a lot of the questions that have been posed already we're going to be discussing now. But I think what's key here is that we understand that, as we say, we're working to regenerate Europe from the ground up, that the role and the voice of regenerating farmers, of those who have been pioneering in this space, for more than a decade, some 15 and 20 years, that we should be taking that experience to help leapfrog and to transition the rest of agricultural, agri-food production in Europe at scale. Next slide, please. So what we see right now, considering all of the shifting pieces from oh, that's my farm, actually. I didn't even realize that that picture was my farm. So you guys get to see where I'm speaking from right now. Right now, where we have a conflux of climate resilience challenges, floods and droughts, which ecologically are two sides of the same coin, which I'm happy to explain at some other point in time from a technical perspective. So we have the climate resilience issues. We have the challenges with farmers' economic instability from the lack of generational transition, those who don't want to continue with the farms or are leaving the farms because they see that that is not an economical or social way to live their lives. And then we're brought together to face the issues on the political side of things, where we have geopolitical challenges that are forcing a rethink of investment in agriculture through the Common Agriculture Policy, the upcoming negotiations on the MFF. So we have a whirlpool of challenges that are all coming to a boil, where we need to be seeing how we can be moving forward as a society, but also environmentally and as an economy. So what we find is that transitioning the agri-food sector at scale to regenerating forms of agriculture really allow us to hit all of those challenges all together. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about the question of what is regenerative agriculture, I think it's important to highlight also what was pointed out by other members of the study group previously, is that having a definition must be context-based. So for us, the definition of regenerative agriculture is really based on four interlinking principles. One, that it is context-specific. Cada granja es un mundo, as we say in Spain. Every farm is its own world. That regeneration must be taken from an outcome perspective, which was why in our study that Danielle highlighted earlier, why we look at results and outcome based, because what we do will have a different effect depending on where we are and all of the different pieces of our context. But what's clear is that what we need to be doing is regenerating soils, which then leads to higher, better quality food, be those plants or animal products, which then leads to improved health for humans, but also improved economic returns, as well, as we have already seen from those original first results from our study. Regeneration is systemic. We cannot just be looking at soil health. It is everything together. It is even extending to our trade relationships, with our contracts, how we work with our employees, how we work with our communities. It is as much social as it is soil health. And that regeneration is a life-enhancing process rather than a permanent state. Two keys to this. Regenerative agriculture is all about increasing abundance of life. So rather than a conventional perspective where one would try to kill everything but that single crop, we are trying to create the diversity within soil, but within plants, within animal insect life, so that it is all working together. And again, this is a process. We talk about regenerating forms of agriculture. We talk about land that is regenerating. You cannot have food that is regenerative. You can have food that is produced on land that is regenerating. And the language that we use is very important, because we have to understand that this is not a fixed state. This is constant movement forward, constant improvement. can you move to the next slide, please? So where we are really trying to focus our proposal for CAP reform that Danielle highlighted before, that's available on our website. You can download that as you wish, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on that. Is we're by transitioning to regenerative agriculture at scale and transitioning the CAP to support that transition, we're able to hit a number of the challenges that already exist in the current agri-food system, but that also exist in the CAP. I think as we saw from the farmer protests last year, that bureaucracy that keeps farmers at the computer instead of on their fields is not where we need to be going. We need to be simplifying and reducing that bureaucratic burden. But it's not just that there's less paperwork, it's so that we're understanding how agri-food systems actually work, how the soil actually works, and then what our role as land stewards is to make sure that that's all working together. We need to be ensuring that there is less risk in the transition to regenerative agriculture, and that is through our different proposals for financial instruments that allow that safety net during the first 4 to 6 years of transition to ensure that we don't have those yield losses. Oftentimes with the transition, it's perceived risk rather than actual risk. But the risk comes when one is doing it without the education and advisory and support that is required in order to make those changes. The great thing now is that there are plenty of us out there who are teaching and advising, who know how to do this, how to leapfrog, how to work with the transition. We just need to make sure that we're able to connect those who need that information with those who have it. We need to be improving our regulatory market and subsidy environment. The fact that everything keeps changing every year introduces more risk rather than more security, which is what we need in order to take those long-term decisions, which is what's required from regenerative transition. As I mentioned before, improved relationships, economic relationships with our buyers, with our off-takers, so that they are also participating in this transition and rewarding the farmers, not just for work that they're doing, but also for the ecosystem services that they're providing. Land access. As more and more farms are abandoned from agricultural production, and there is more consolidation, it is more difficult for first-generation new entry farmers to secure the land that they need in order to be able to be producing. And so if we're trying to facilitate this transition at scale, we need to make sure that they also have access to land. Next slide, please. This is where we go in a bit already to what Danielle has discussed. I would just like to quickly highlight that when we're talking about measuring photosynthesis and measuring ground cover from an ecosystem process perspective, it also means that we are able to insinuate a functioning water cycle, because when the ground is covered either with living roots or with mulch, we're able to show that the water is infiltrated and then it is retained, and it stays much longer in the soil than if that ground was bare. It also demonstrates that the mineral cycle is functioning, because again, you have those roots of that mulch that is then facilitating the work amongst the microbiology in the soil. We're able to assume higher levels of biodiversity, because we know that with the higher levels of photosynthesis, coming to the end, don't worry. Yes, thank you so much for that. Just to say that you cannot achieve the highest levels of photosynthesis unless you have high levels of biodiversity in the soil, which comes from high levels of plants life. So it all works together. So we can go ahead and slide through to the end. We've already seen the results from our study. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. You'll have to forgive me. Sometimes I get into professor mode and start teaching. And then really what it takes to have the transition is that it must be farmer-led and working with us. We're always saying that no rules, no decisions should be taken about us without us. So please remember that when we're in these negotiations. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. And I hand over, since we are running out of time, to Dionys Forster, who is the Director General of SAI platform. This is the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform, a global non-profit organization. So the floor is yours, please.
So good morning to you all, and thank you very much for having me this morning in this forum. A few words about SAI Platform for those who don't know SAI Platform. SAI Platform is a food and beverage industry association founded in 2002 by Unilever, Danone, and Nestle. SAI Platform promotes and disseminates good agricultural principles and practices across the agri-food industry. Today, we have roughly about 200 members of the entire industry, from farm input providers, farmer organizations, processors, the traders, manufacturers, but as well retailers. So in the coming few minutes, I wanted to talk about Regenerating Together, our framework version 1.1, and this 1.1 basically indicates there will be different versions of that. There will be a continuous evolution of this framework, so this is not all carved in stone. So let me start. But maybe first, so what is the rationale for promoting regenerative agriculture from a food and beverage industry perspective? Now we have seen that there are basically two commitments that are out there. There are commitments out that members that say we wanted to increase the volume of raw materials procured from farms implementing regenerative agriculture practices. We can also see members that say we wanted to increase the area of land under regenerative agriculture practices. Now, for what is the aim? So basically, our members are aware of the challenges that we are heading to. They are aware of the climate change, and they wanted to contribute. They wanted to maintain and improve on-farm biodiversity. They wanted to improve the efficiency of resource use, and they wanted to reduce the climate footprint of their supply chains. They believe that regenerative agriculture can contribute mainly to the four following areas, impact areas: soil health, water, biodiversity, and climate. So, but scaling regenerative agriculture has challenges. And so far, there was not really a good definition, or there was no alignment on the definition of regenerative agriculture and possibly expected outcomes. This caused basically confusion about what to do at farm level and also at value chain level. Also, it caused difficulties to evaluate benefits to effectively communicate. It caused confusions about the validity of claims and the risk of greenwashing, and none of the members want to fall into this trap of greenwashing. And then finally, it's difficulties in developing incentive mechanisms. So those difficulties contributed so far to a limited on-the-ground action. That's why 3 years ago, about 33 members, the ones that you see here on the slide, they came to us and they said, we would like you, SAI Platform, to define for us regenerative agriculture. So this is what we did. So our framework basically comes forward with a shared definition of regenerative agriculture. It brings up a list of regenerative agriculture outcomes to assess progress against. And it also comes forward with a set of guidance documents to make verified claims. A few more words about the frameworks. We want this framework to be a global framework, not just a European framework. And because we want to have it global, the framework needs to have a couple of design principles in place. One of that is the outcome-based, and we have just heard it before by Megan. So it needs to be quantifiable and meaningful proxies for the environmental impact across soil health, water, biodiversity, and climate. But it needs also to be context specific. No farm is equal to another. No farm has exactly the same challenges as another. So the framework needs to be adaptable to the local farm conditions, to the local farming system. So that is important, or was important when designing the Regenerating Together framework. And finally, it has to be inclusive. Basically, if a farmer moves towards regenerative agriculture and he goes on this journey, he needs to pass through different levels, and the food industry wants in a position to acknowledge basically those farmers and reward those farmers who move actually on this journey towards regenerative agriculture. Now, what does the food industry, how does the food industry define regenerative agriculture? We heard it partially already. Regenerative agriculture is an outcome-based farming system approach that protects and improves soil health, biodiversity, climate, and water resources while supporting farmer livelihoods. And the last part, farmer livelihood, is equally important than the other. So it's quite a broad definition. We are aware of that, but it helps us to guide and give us direction for the further development of the framework. Now we have defined over the last 3 years, basically, the framework with 12 shared outcomes. We have a couple of them here visible on the slide. The color code refers to the causal relationship between the outcome and an impact area, meaning that if an outcome has a red dot, basically it contributes to soil health, etc., etc. If we wanted to measure outcomes, and we want to be in a position to measure at one point, right, we need to have indicators. So to measure and to report on the progress. So we have identified also indicators how we can measure the outcomes. We did go a step further as well, because we are aware that at the farm level, the farmer might not work on this. He may work on the outcomes, but it will not, basically the practices are not the outcomes, but there are practices that the farmer is implementing, right? And we wanted to understand how these practices refer to the outcomes and what are the causal relationships here. So we mapped the outcomes, the practices against the outcomes. So on the x-axis, you have the outcomes. On the vertical axis, you have the practices. And you see by the plus, minus, or 2 plus or 3 plus, you see basically the strengths of the relationship between a practice and a particular outcome. So this is what we developed. Now we are moving forward with additional, let's say, instruments. So we have now a couple of resources released this year. We have in January the framework implementation guide released. In February we released our outcome quantification guide. And in April now we released our assessment tool. We have this assessment tool available as an Excel-based version and as well as a web-based version. And we will, of course, work further on those and will implement with our member the framework going forward. And with that, I'm already coming to the end. So I would like to thank you all for the attention and look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forster. And now the floor is to Kasper Zulim de Zwarte. Sorry for the pronunciation. Yes, I'm so sorry. From Planet Business for Biodiversity. It's another platform, I mean. The floor is yours.
Yes. So One Planet Business for Biodiversity is a business coalition. We are part of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And what our aim is really to scale up regenerative agriculture and accelerate the transition. over value change. And we have a target. We have a target of having 40% of regenerative production by 2030. Why exactly 40%? Because the World Economic Forum calculated for us that if we reach 40% regenerative agriculture, this is one way to achieve a net zero agricultural system. Next slide, please. Then I'll tell a bit more on who we are. Oh, thank you. So we are a business coalition of about 27 members. Most of them are very large multinational cooperatives. We span different supply chains from farm to fork, so farmer cooperatives to retailers, not only in the food sector, but also in fashion, furniture, cosmetics, and we have a number of financial actors and one large bank with us to help finance the transition to regenerative agriculture, along with some data companies and knowledge partners. Together, these companies represent about $726 billion in revenues. And why is it important that we have this scale? Is that this helps us really to scale up regenerative agriculture. These companies are investing heavily in the transition. In the past few years, almost 3.6 billion euros, and about that, from that money, about half of that directly benefited farmers. They are setting up pilot farms. About 300,000 farmers worldwide are now involved with programs that these companies run. And the aim for these companies alone is to have 12.5 million hectares under regenerative practices at a global scale. You can download the figures in the document. In the coming 7 minutes, I will try to address not only the definition and how do we measure impact, but also some of the questions from the gentleman from Austria, Germany, and Spain that were addressed earlier. So, what is regenerative agriculture? Again, it is the same definition as Sai just gave to us. Regenerative agriculture is on the one hand promoting measurable positive impact on soil health, on biodiversity, on climate and on water management, while equally important improving farmer livelihoods. So it has a beneficial, positive business outcome for farmers. This is the definition that we are now trying to get out in the world, and down you see the text that is now in the UNCCD process, and it will be back, I think, in next year when the consultation is done. So it is a holistic, outcome-based approach. This definition, as our SAI colleague just said, is very open. And why is it very open? I think the one thing that you need to remember is that regenerative agriculture is an innovation pathway. You start somewhere, you start changing the way you do agriculture, and you go to a specific target. If we box it in, then the innovation is gone, and then we can't adapt it to local circumstances, which I think is very important. So, together with SAI, together with farmers, and together with over 1,000 businesses, almost 1,000 businesses, we set up this framework on impacts. Because if we can't completely define what regenerative agriculture is, because it is something different for a dairy farmer in the Netherlands as for a tomato farmer in Spain or a sunflower farmer in Romania, you need to measure what the effect is. And we set up a system together with SAI and with farmers and with these businesses on what do we need to measure. So we need to measure impact on climate, on water, reduced pesticide risks, what we discussed earlier, on biodiversity, and very important, on the benefits for farmers, so financial and social benefits for farmers. In the past 2 years, we delivered 5 reports, business guidances on how to measure this, and this is basically the global summary of those reports. a little bit more on why farmers are transitioning and what hinders them. Regenerative agriculture has a positive business case for farmers. What we see that that profitability is within 3 to 5 years at the same level as it was before you start making the transition, and about 15% additional profits can be made if you transition to regenerative agriculture. How does that work? Well, part of the costs go down because you are using less fuel, less pesticides, less other inputs, and you benefit from increased my apologies. Increased output, thank you. What is stopping them? There are a few things that are stopping them. We already discussed social and learning hinders. One of the things is that the cost for transition is quite intensive. It is 2,000 to 5,000 euros per hectare in Europe. This is something that Deloitte calculated for us. They also made a cash flow forecast on how this pathway goes for different farms in Europe, in different areas, different sizes of farms and different crops. What is needed to help farmers make this transition is really collaboration across the value chain and with government. We need to start speaking the same language, farmers, businesses and government. This is why this outcome-based approach is so important, because that gives us a framework not to discuss what is happening on a very specific farm in Spain, Romania or Austria, because that is, Yara said it, a farm is a world in its own, but the way that we can discuss the outcomes of it can be equal. What we need governments for is really to set the norms for those outcomes, and this is why we are discussing with you, with the Commission and with Parliament, how this framework can be set up. And then my final slide is really on, so what can governments do here? We need to have a recognition of regenerative agriculture. Now it is a bit everywhere, so we need to have not a boxed-in definition, but at least a definition of the outcomes. What does it do? And as said, most companies, together with farmers, are agreeing on a specific way of defining regenerative agriculture, which empowers farmers to make their own decision and empowers business to have their innovation pathway. We need to develop an EU-wide protocol on how to measure impact. Again, that farmers, businesses and governments are speaking the same language. And we need to integrate regenerative agriculture into CAP to support farmers. Basically what we need, what helps farmers, would be a one-stop shop for finance. What we see is that the capital is there, it is just impossible to access it. It is a patchwork of different rules and regulations on the government side. Every country has their own strategic CAP pathway. It is not aligned with what banks are doing, and it is not aligned with what businesses are doing and what farmers are doing. So we are pleading for this one-stop shop where farmers, which helps farmers not only to make the decisions, which help the technical decisions for the transition to regenerative agriculture, but also the financial decisions and how to make this work. And I think this is my.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And our last speaker of this panel is Marianne Kettunen from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and she's member of the coordination group of the European Circular Economic Stakeholder Platform. So the floor is yours, please.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning to all.
Good morning.
And a big thank you for inviting me to be part of this session as well. So, as mentioned, my name is Marianne Kettunen, and I represent the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And for those who might not know who Ellen MacArthur Foundation is, we work on circular economy, so supporting circular economy shift across sectors, including food and agriculture sector as well. So my intervention today comes really from the perspective of what does it look like if we apply circular economy lens to food systems and agriculture, placing regenerative agriculture at the heart of it. So I'm not speaking directly to the position or definition of regenerative agriculture. I'm speaking defining regenerative agriculture as part of this wider contextual framework as necessary, I think, in the current context of the policies in the European Union and more broadly as well. And you might be asking yourself, why circular economy lens? What additional value does it already bring to the complex issue of regenerative agriculture? And I have two thoughts on that for you to keep in mind throughout my intervention. I think that if we apply circular economy lens to regenerative agriculture, it allows us to adopt a systems view, which brings us to some of those barriers and addressing some of those barriers that have been highlighted by previous speakers in this session. So keep that in mind. And secondly, more pragmatically, European Union policy context has circular economy currently very much at the heart and center of it. It's at the heart and center of the Clean Industrial Deal. It's a big part of how we look at the bioeconomy strategy going forward. So therefore, being able to frame regenerative agriculture through this lens feels very important in the political and policy context moving forward as well. So with that, can I get my next slide, please? So in 2021, at Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we published one of our sectoral flagship reports looking at what would a vision for circular economy for the food systems and agriculture look like. And this report concluded that if we apply circular and regenerative approach to how we design or redesign our food products and food product portfolios, we can get a lot of benefits both at the farm level for the farmers and also for climate and biodiversity. And really the emphasis here is the design and redesign of food products and food product portfolios. So the green bars on the left show you the benefits if we are shifting to resourcing more sustainably for the current food products and food product portfolios we have and the businesses have at the moment. The blue bars show if we actually start to redesign and rethink the food product portfolios from the start, how much extra benefits we are getting for farmers and also biodiversity and climate. And you can see the benefits through our modeling are quite impressive. So we're looking at 70% of reduction on greenhouse gases, 50% of reduction in biodiversity loss, while at the same time increasing the food output and also farmer income at the farm level as well. Could I get a next slide, please? So these positive impacts are based on combining 4 core approaches at the center of the circular economy for food systems and agriculture. And you can see regenerative production is at the heart of it. Circular economy is all about keeping resources in use at the highest value, at the highest potential. And that's why the regenerative approaches are really at the heart of circular economy for food systems as the way Ellen MacArthur Foundation sees it. They keep the soil in use, and that is, the previous speaker from University Leuven highlighted that soil is our key asset in the bioeconomy, and that really is what this is all about, and that is why regenerative approach is key here. In addition to the regenerative approaches, we should be also looking to apply lower impact ingredients and more diverse ingredients in our food portfolio, and also creating new food products by upcycling byproducts of current food production as well. So if we look at these 4 approaches in one package, that will start to deliver those benefits I showed in the earlier slide, and creating a circularly designed food system with, again, regenerative agriculture at the heart of it. Can I get my next slide, please? So building on all of this, we took the theory to a test. And we challenged a range of companies, ranging from retailers to food producers, to join what we call the Food Challenge. And we've been working on this now for the past 1.5 years. And since January on, we have 140 products designed using this this approach, made by 57 companies across 12 countries, and a number of these already in a market in the in the UK and also some in Latin America. And you can see on the right-hand side corner of my slide, these products are labeled as nature in mind. So you can also, find them through the website by Googling and, seeing what the products are and what they look like. So if I get my next slide, please. We also looked at how do these redesigned products score compared to the average overall products on the food industry and food market at the moment. And we could see that the challenge products score higher when it comes to benefits to climate, benefits to biodiversity, benefits to water usage compared to the industry average at the market at the moment. So they really are based on this scoring, delivering those benefits that we are trying to push them and provide them to bring. Can I get my next slide, please? So finally, very in a nutshell, what the work we've done so far has shown that it is possible in a concrete terms to design food products and food product portfolios that they are regenerative and circularly designed and bring therefore benefits to the farm level and also climate and biodiversity. And together with the challenge participants, both the retailers and food producers, we've looked at already initially what are the key lessons learned. We're currently working on these, so these are the first initial lessons learned that I'm sharing here. And one of the key lessons I would like to highlight for the purposes of today's session is, firstly, as already mentioned, using regenerative approaches, but also this more broader, wider circular approach really helps the companies to be future-proofing and de-risking their existing supply chains. So it really provides these type of benefits to the food suppliers and therefore is a driver for them to shift to more diverse portfolios, this way encouraging regenerative agriculture on the ground. And secondly, farm level benefits have been several times noted during the session today. And what we've learned through our challenge is that if producers adopt this more circular approach to their food design and food portfolio design, it really helps to integrate farmers into the supply chains and helps to secure their position in the food supply chain and have a say in the food supply chain as well. So I think around 70% of the challenge participants reported that the dialogue and links to the farmers and farm level have improved during the challenge and provided them an opportunity to be doing more co-creation with the farmers as well. So if I get my last slide, please. If you want to get this all in a nutshell and in a much more pleasing form than by me trying to explain it to you in a couple of minutes, please take a look at our video that we've developed in the last month and published in the last month, which gives you an idea of what the Big Food Redesign Challenge was about and what we're advocating for. But really, very shortly, and also perhaps framing this all through the lens of recommendations towards the future opinion. This is all about creating opportunities and demand for regenerative agriculture by taking a step back, looking at the whole food supply chain, looking at how we design our food portfolios, and using that lens to help regenerative agriculture to thrive. And I think, as said before, this is really important in the context of the current European policy at the moment, where circular economy is one of the key framing for different sectors, including the food sector. So being able to highlight the need for this type of innovation, this type of co-creation and cooperation with farmers, I think will be very important in the opinion as well. So with that, I'm looking forward to discussion and also any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. And now that we listened to 4 very interesting presentations, I give you the floor, dear colleagues, here in the room and online as well. So who would like to start? Joe, please. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Excellent presentations and very, very interesting. I'm a farmer myself. I'm suppose, what you could describe as a conventional farmer. I was just struck, Casper, you had an excellent presentation, but in relation to, well, I suppose two things. The first one is 5 reports in 2 years seems more of a reporting organisation than, it just seems a lot. And to me, reports can come up with a lot of what the instigators wanted to come up with. The 2,000, but that's beside the point now. What I was struck by, the 2,000 to 5,000 costs, you know, unless there's huge support for that, it won't happen, because that sort of profitability isn't there already in the conventional farming to allow them make that investment to transfer over. And is that, how does that break down? Take any figure of that 2,000 to 5,000. Is it a loss in income, or is it costs of actually changing over, and what are those costs? Thank you.
I'll start with this question then. It breaks down, we have this financial investment stack that's necessary. So part of it is capex that is necessary. You need new machinery, you might need more lands. Part of it is OPEX. So if you go through this transition, you will have a bit of a yield drop. That means that off-takers, our members, would need to co-invest here to have, where did I write it down? My apologies. To have price premiums, to have long-lasting contracts, to make sure that they go through this yield gap. Much of it is also in knowledge costs. So you need to relearn what we already said, is what does it take to make this transition work. And I think those are the most important costs that are necessary. And those 2,000 to 5,000, they differ from farm to farm. Depends where you start. What kind of investments are you making? Are you going to share, for instance, expensive equipment? And why we are pleading for this one-stop shop is that this the capital is there that we can see, but it just needs to come together. Farmers are very good at farming. They are not financial experts. I know one exception, but that means that they need support on making this puzzle work. And I think that one of the major holdbacks for these farmers is this financial risk. And it is not just a 2,000 to 5,000 euros transition cost, because that's overseeable, because you know that you will have a higher profit in about 5 years. But if you have a huge pre-existing debt, this is one of the main reasons farmers will not invest in this. It is a big risk, and our members, together with banks and hopefully also soon together with the European Union, will reduce this risk and make sure that it is manageable for farmers to make this transition.
Stoyan, please.
Well, never works for the first time.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Casper, for coming here and for giving this really brilliant presentation. I have a very quick question for the very beginning, because you mentioned 950 big companies. It's impossible to see the names of all of them, but you can see really well-known names, variety of spectrum, you know, from banks to retailers, etc., etc. What was the initial, let's say, the initial moment, the fire starter? How you decided to start doing this? What's actually provoking one of those companies or many of them to start thinking and doing this alliance in this direction?
The alliance is now 6 years old. It started with Emmanuel Faber and Macron, working together, really saying we need to make a difference on biodiversity, because this is one of the big challenges for the future. And one of how can you deal with that is with regenerative agriculture. Why are all these 27 companies which are members of One Planet Business for Biodiversity, why are they investing such a huge amount in regenerative agriculture? Because they see that climate change is actually a risk for the business. So they need to deal with this risk, and this is why they are investing, not from the good of their heart, but for the future of their business.
Thank you so much. First, Maria online, and then Andreas, please.
Thank you. Another question for Casper. You mentioned you have a target of 40% to convert to regenerative by 2030. How far away are you from the target? Thank you.
We are still determining where we are at this point in Europe. We do know from a global perspective how many hectares, but in Europe at this point, I wouldn't be able to tell. I hope that when I come back here next year, I could.
Thank you, Piroshka, and thank you for the presentations. As the business model has been touched, and when you see the list of companies joining this initiative or seeing it apparently as a business model, how do the participating farmers profit or take part in this business model? Is there a solution to have a differentiation on the market and to achieve, in the end, a higher price for products coming out of regenerative farming systems? As, for instance, would be the target also for organic farming, but then it's always the question of supply and demand also. But do you see, I think the question goes to both of you and also the MacArthur Foundation, is there a possibility to achieve higher prices, farm gate prices, through an engagement in these models of farming? Thank you.
Short answer is yes. So for the transition, for now, our members, many of our members are having long-term contracts and price premiums on regenerative farming. And there's this whole system on what you do, and every company has a different system, but there are price premiums for regenerative agriculture. That's one thing. The other benefit is that these companies are co-investing with farmers. So if farmers, for instance, from McCain or Friesland Campina and also Arla, I think, if they need an investment from a bank, for instance, they work together with these companies to have a reduced interest rate, or they can get a reduced premium on their insurances. So it's on both sides. It is these companies helping with higher margins, so increased pricing, but also helping to reduce the cost and reducing the risk. And some of the companies are also just investing through either equipment or seeds. So there is a high profit to be made here, and companies and farmers are working very closely together to make this transition happen.
Thank you, Maurizio.
Sì, grazie.
Thank you. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced by the explanations that we've been given. Why? Because, as I said earlier, farmers need to be involved in this. Today, farmers are subject to the process. They don't actively play a part in it. It's like this artificial meat where we see big media talking about it and saying that it is the solution to end world hunger. What I think is that we need balanced governance where we, the farmers, have a role as a protagonist and not as a spectator. And indeed, the tone of what's been said, banking interests, finance, we have structures in the agri-food business sector that are very efficient. Just look at the Draghi report. He saw what farm businesses could do. He knows the industry well. Now, there's a social aspect. If we look at the regenerative agriculture, we can compare it to what we did with organics, or also the concepts that come from the green sector, not just in Germany, but elsewhere. These have a similar message. So we need a balance in what is decided. And I can see that we're in good hands with Stoyan. He has a very balanced view. To ensure that the committee isn't instrumentalized. Thank you.
I see Marianne Ketunen online asking for the floor. So please.
Great, thank you. I thought there was also a question towards my direction earlier, but I'm going to reflect the two previous questions now. So the first question was, how do farmers actually benefit from this? And is it possible really to benefit through increased prices based on our experience and our challenge experience? So similar answer to the colleague from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, yes, it is. So similar answers, also partly because a number of the organizations or businesses who are part of our challenge are also part of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's platform as well. But in addition to the price-related benefit or increased farm gate prices to farmers, I want to also highlight that the approach that we've been trialing, which is also about more diverse ingredients as part of the food product portfolios. What it provides to farmers is this ability and demand for diversification. So in a way, creating a broader demand, broader ability to create not only one or two types of crops, but actually more wider diversity of crops, which can also help, I think, in terms of de-risking and also climate adaptation and so forth. So there's also that type of de-risking benefits to farmers as well, not only to the food producers. And secondly, to the previous comment on farmers need to be more involved. Absolutely. And I just wanted to highlight again what I finished with as one of the benefits that we have experienced and our participants have reported back is that farmers have been more involved through these approaches, 70% more engagement with farmers due to this co-creation need, using more diverse ingredients in the food portfolios, creating these food products and portfolios together more with farmers as well. So there is strongly in our minds and views also the need for the better farmer engagement and involvement in the supply chains, which is part of our approach.
Thank you very much. And I see two speakers asking for the floor. So please, Megan, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's important to highlight that when we're producing food regeneratively or we're managing our land regeneratively, just the sheer fact that we are reducing significantly our inputs and we're increasing ecosystem function that is improving our productivity, the cost of production lowers significantly, which means that producing regeneratively, we should not need premiums. We may need premiums during the transition. We may need other financial mechanisms to support that, but that producing food regeneratively overall is much cheaper than producing conventionally. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. I think it's also important when we're talking about access to food, access to high quality, nutrient dense food. We cannot allow regeneratively produced food to become an elitist product that is out of the financial reach of many of our consumers. Yes, we as farmers, we sell to a very lucrative market in San Sebastian in the north of Spain, where, people can and do afford that higher quality food. But it's because of the scale that we are producing at. But producing at scale regeneratively should mean that there is plenty of food, high density, nutritional, quality food that should be available at conventional prices or lower. Because as we know, with yields going down with conventional production and the higher input costs, the cost of food are going up. So I think we just need to be very clear on those two different sides of that coin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dionis Forster, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Maybe just 2 points to farmer involvement and benefits for farmers. First of all, when we designed our Regenerating Together framework, basically we had the goal as well to make that as simple and lean as possible, right? So that the administrative burden is limited for farmers when they report through the framework. And what is for us important that through the process, the farmer goes through a baseline assessment, basically as a status quo assessment, to look at where he or she stands. And then there is an improvement plan that he or she defines, and there will be a progress assessment after a certain time. So that is really, it's inclusive with the farmer. It's not basically that the food industry has the intention to put that on to the farmer. It's really together with the farmer to develop basically this regenerative plan for the enterprise to transform. So again, as what others have been saying, in terms of benefits, I see on the one hand there can be price premiums, but there can be also cost reductions. And I think what counts is the margin at the end that stays with the farmer, and we need to look at that. So what we have in mind is really a lean system. It needs further development, it's clear, but I think when we listen to the farmer and we test it with farmers again and again, we have always, the feedback is always very, very positive. Farmers really like the openness, that they can adapt it to the local context, that it is not rigid as other kind of frameworks. And that it gives them kind of the opportunity. They stay basically the entrepreneurs with our framework. And this is what we want. We don't want to have them just managing. We want them to be entrepreneurs, taking their own decisions for the best of their enterprise. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you very much. Before handing over to Joe, the next panel, please, Joseph, keep.
Gracias, pero...
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say thanks for all of this information and all the work that all these organizations are doing around this concept of regenerative agriculture, because there aren't pioneers and people who are working on these things, then there won't be progress. Now, if we want regenerative agriculture to become the agriculture of the future, the conventional agriculture of the future, then we need to be very strict. I gave 2 clear examples earlier, one which was soils and the other which was water, and we need to be really strict around these both of these. We have to meet the requirements, and then with a judicious use of suitable measures, because then we will get the best result for agriculture, which is to have good quality of soils and availability of good quality water and producing high quality food for consumers. This is our goal. And I'm sorry, but you're not going to get more credit for whether your food is regenerative or if it's organic. If you look at the losses that we had last year and the years previous, companies, family farms, medium sized farms, the same things have happened, is that they struggle to get access to credit. If we want to buy more land or more farms, then we have to take out mortgages and get into debt. And I'm sorry, but the price of an organic farm, the prices of oil and wine are at least the same price, and they may even be cheaper than a conventional production. As our colleague said when she was talking about San Sebastian, you get a better price in these markets, but the average price of organic, certified DOP, IGP production, regenerative agriculture, the prices are those that the market is prepared to pay. And they're often less than the cost of production. And I think we need to be honest about this. Output, the objective for the farmer is to have a traceable, certified proof of work that has been done well, but you're not going to earn the money on this in the very same crop year. This is a medium-term benefit that you're going to obtain here in the medium term, because you're going to have clean water, clean soils. But let's not give the impression that we're going to get higher prices for this, because it's not going to happen. Organic grapes last year were paid 5 centimes a kilo more than conventional grapes, for example. That's at the level of Spain. There is some individual farmers might be able to sell their organic wine for $20 a bottle, but the average cost of a bottle of wine in the US is $2.8 per bottle. And the organic wine is 2.9. So that's the reality. And I think that all the work done by these organizations who promote regenerative agriculture are doing this so that the situation improves and we can obtain better results. And this is a very noble goal. It's a worthy goal. But we need to use less pesticides. We need to do things well. And then the result of this is professional and personal satisfaction. But I don't think we're going to get paid more. Thank you.
Non. Merci, Joseph. On va y arriver tout doucement. Mais...
Thank you, Josep. We will get there gradually. Slowly, slowly catch the monkey, as we say in regenerative agriculture. Joe.
Yes. You are welcome. Piroshka wants to sit in the room and she wants to see you face to face. Voilà. Et les autres intervenants qui sont dans la...
And the other speakers, those of you who are in the room, can you come up to the counter, please, to the front? We have Lena Girard, Ivan Ivanov, Anna Rocha. I think everybody's actually here in the room, so could you come up, please? Thank you.
Oui, c'est ce qu'on a changé. Piroshka veut me voir aussi face to face, mais je ne l'ai pas dit.
For you.
Nice to see you.
You too.
Juana, you are there, Juana.
Yeah, that's you. That's you. Yeah. Your name is there.
You have the...
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
True. You have that's. You're starting here.
Right. Where's Matthew? Okay.
Can we close the microphone of the President, please? Can we close the microphone?
To everyone who has attended this morning, and I think it was excellent, very, very interesting. And I've no doubt that this panel will be equally as interesting. And we're here to discuss the recommendations supporting the transformation of EU agri-food systems towards regenerative agriculture in the Common Agricultural Policy and beyond. And we've a great lineup of speakers here, some of which I'd have come across before and have even worked with. So I'm very interested to hear what they have to say, and even more interested to see what the questions and answers throw up. I think if Paraska had got another hour in the previous panel, she would have questions that would have kept going for another hour and beyond. So that shows the level of interest in this topic. And, you know, I think the great thing about those panels is it's open for debate. We don't have to agree with everyone, and I think we're in the early stages, despite the fact that we're probably returning to our roots and getting back to, you know, or suggesting getting back to an era where my grandfather didn't use pesticides, used very little fertilizer. And I suppose the thought in my head is, why did we move away from that? You know, was it economics that moved us away from that, or what was it that moved us away? I think myself, I have my own views on it. But I would also like to say at the very start, and we'll get straight into the speakers then, as a conventional farmer, it irks me at times, you know, to listen to people talk about we need to get to a situation where we produce quality food. I would like to think, as a conventional farmer, every bit of food that I produce from my farm is quality food. And indeed, I think most farmers around the world are of a similar ilk. So, look, with that, we'll get straight into it. We have 5 speakers. They have 5 minutes each, and we'll be strict enough on that. And our first speaker is Matthew Courgeot from the European Coordination via Campesina. So over to you, Matthew, for the next 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
It's okay. I will speak in French. Donc, je m'appelle Mathieu.
My name is Mathieu Courgeot, and I'm a dairy farmer in the west of France. There are 3 of us working on the farm, and I'm here today representing the European coordination of Via Campesina. Via Campesina is a movement of farmers and farm workers across the whole of Europe. Currently, we have 31 member organizations across 21 countries, and we're the European branch of La Via Campesina, which is the biggest social movement of farmers worldwide. So today, we're here to talk about regenerative agriculture and preserving soils. And we're thinking about how farmers can step up to the plate in the face of the challenges that we face, climate change, the health crises arising from that, the generational handover of different farmers, and all of that is interlinked. So in our view, it's important to take a holistic view of all of this. We want to ensure that we're not working in silos. For us, it's really about looking at all of this as a whole. It's about putting forward policy solutions that are systemic. And there's something of particular concern to us. It's the situation that farmers are in today. If you look at the income, currently you have low income across the board, lower than what you see across the rest of the economy on average. So that's our first concern, major concern. The income of farmers across Europe. Then there's the matter of the fact that our farmers are getting older. And just to remind you, over the past 15 years, about 5 million farmers have had to close down their farms. You're looking at some major figures here. There were 15 million farmers, now there are only 10 million. Now, Professor Matthijs earlier talked about the obstacles to the transition, and there are a lot of those barriers, but these two, low income and farmers that are getting older, these are two fundamental obstacles when it comes to the transition that we require in our agriculture. So on the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, our main request is that we work on agricultural prices, that we look at the markets, because there is a major issue today with the redistribution of value amongst farmers and the rest of the food chain. So our request is that the Common Organisation of Markets, the CMO, be reviewed. What we want to see is a situation wherein our production costs are covered, the production costs for producers. We're asking too that there be regulation of volumes. We want to make sure that there are farmers spread out across all of Europe, including in areas where it's difficult to farm. And just to give you an overview of my points, I'm going to move on now to that seventh point you see on the slide. One of our major demands is an increase of regulation of imports, which would require a review of European trade policy. So I'm thinking of free trade agreements here. Mercosur has been a major topic of discussion for us. And the trade war, it's been declared by Trump. All of this means that we feel that it's the right time for the EU to rethink its trade policy. So that was just to give you some background information. And this would serve as a first step to transition policy and to adapting to climate change, most notably. A further crucial issue is a fairer system for distributing CAP payments. We think that this ought to be refashioned. We want to see much more targeted payments, and on this we would very much share the conclusions arising from the strategic dialogue. If you look at CAP payments, that's about 50 billion euros across Europe today. It's a lot of money. And these payments, in our view, ought to be directed to farmers that are active, encouraging also young people to take up farming, and we want to make sure that there's a ceiling on those payments to ensure that smaller and medium-sized farms are given priority, because these are the farms that are ensuring that we have food on the table, and they're the farms that are going to enable the transition that's coming. So this is certainly a key demand of ours. We want to really target that aid to ensure that we can keep up the numbers of farmers in Europe. And then a further matter as well is ensuring that this aid is really specifically targeting the climate transition, where regenerative agriculture really has a role to play. Now, all of this would entail a re-examination of how farms work. Agroecology would be part of that, and we want to make sure that there are payments coming to support farms through that transition. And we would like to see, too, good farming practices being supported. Of course, farmers can always work to improve their practices, but it's also important that we have payments coming in to support farmers with good practices. Just a final point now. We can see that there's an increasing number of crises, and so we're going to need support to create robust systems that can that are strong enough to withstand the crises that are going to be taking place. Just a third point now as well. This sits somewhat outside the Common Agricultural Policy, but we feel that it is linked, and it's got to do with access to land. This is a major hurdle as things stand, and it's a risk. Particularly when you look at carbon farming. We'll be able to come back to that maybe in the Q&A, but we feel that you have a risk of land grabbing for carbon credits. So this is something that we place a lot of focus on. We need to ensure that young farmers have access to land. We want to see, too, coordination with public food policies. we were very much in support of FS-SLOW, and we feel that this was really a piece of the puzzle that was missing. And another concern that we have is the competitive use of land for food, but then also for energy production. We need to ensure that we're keeping a close eye on that, and in particular on the way CAP funds are used. I think that I was able to stick to my 5 minutes, but very happy to look at these subjects again with you. But if I can just finish on this point, when it comes to the CAP, we need a good CAP budget. We need to make sure that that budget focuses on market regulation. But also we want to make sure, as I said, that this aid is really channeled into supporting young farmers and channeled into working with the green transition and good practices in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I think that sets the bar at a fair, solid level for the rest of our discussion this morning. So thank you for that. And we'll continue with the next speaker, and that's a former colleague of mine in COPA, Una Niagu. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. So I represent the European farmers and agri-cooperatives, our members, around 70 national farmers and cooperatives organizations. Yes, so I will start with first maybe some words on how we see the regenerative agriculture, and then I will link it also with the discussion on the CAP, and maybe with the most important topic that we have on the table today, that is the budget. Because we can discuss a lot about how to continue to enhance our sustainability in the future, but if we don't have a clear picture how to finance this, this remains quite a big issue. So for us, regenerative agriculture is not a new concept. Practices, processes, and outcomes stemming from the regenerative agriculture have been around for decades, so it's nothing new. The practices that are linked to the regenerative agriculture, the different regenerative agriculture definitions that are today overlap already with many existing farming approaches, such as conservation agriculture, agroecology, circular approaches, or organic, just to name some of them. Many of the farming practices that they fall under the regenerative agriculture are already carried out by those in the conventional farming. And they can be named like best practices with a view to improve soil and health, and also to facilitate the transition to a more sustainable agriculture. In our views, practices considered regenerative could be part of a future toolbox that help farmers to be more sustainable. But this is just one of the tools that could be included in the future discussions, and should not be the only one. Now, coming to the link with the future CAP, let me stress some key elements from our side. First, I want to refer to a workshop that was organized by the Commission last year in the context of the discussion on the future CAP. It was organized with various civil dialogue groups. And there was one of the topics that was addressed was the regenerative agriculture. And it is interesting to stress that in the conclusions of this workshop, it was mentioned that there was no consensus on how regenerative agriculture should be included in the future CAP, and there were different views on the need to have EU level definitions. So this is something important to stress. And we think that one of the main reasons why there was no consensus is that there is a risk to decrease the flexibility needed to respond to the diversity of our agriculture sector, of the farming conditions also in the EU. In addition, this is also one of the key principles of the CAP strategic plans, to take into account the local conditions. As you know, the member states, they have the flexibility to include in their strategic plans interventions that address their needs at local level, and what is the best for the farming sector. In this case, from our side, we don't favor a prescriptive approach, and this is also the logic of the eco schemes, of the agri-environment climate measures interventions. So that's why in the EU currently we don't have a prescriptive list of what member states need to include. So therefore, practical, voluntary, incentivizing interventions are important from our perspective to be included in the CAP. All the sustainable practices need to be flexible, adaptable to the local conditions to ensure the viability of the future farms. And here all three pillars need to be addressed and supported. And all new initiatives, and I think this was also stressed by some of the interventions here in the room, needs to be farmer-driven, needs to be bottom-up. We need to have integrated approaches, and to make sure that this will bring value to the farmers and to the farm. Now, the last point, as I mentioned at the beginning, that I would like to bring into attention is the discussion on the future CAP. As you know, there are some worrying rumors, and not only rumors, it's more than a rumor, that maybe the Commission will propose a single fund. And this is for us something that is unacceptable. The farming community will react strongly if such an initiative will be put forward. And I would like to draw your attention to this because, as I mentioned, we can discuss here about a lot of good practices, initiatives that we could also support in the future. But we need to join forces and fight together to make sure that we will continue to have a CAP fund, a dedicated CAP fund for our agriculture sector in the future, and that we keep also to have it together with the rural development, because we cannot advance and continue the transition without having viable, strong rural areas in the future. Thank you very much, and I look forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. When you started off there and said that you were going to look at how you see, or how you see regenerative agriculture, its link to CAP and the budget, I thought to myself, if this lady can get this done in 5 minutes, there has been an awful lot of time wasted over the past 50, 60, 70 years. But you did, and I'm sure we'll flesh it out more in the Q&A afterwards. In the meantime, we continue, and our next speaker is Lina Girard from Food Drinks Europe, and hopefully she will speak on the commitments of EU food processors towards regenerative practices. So over to you, Lina.
Thank you very much for having me today. I'm actually maybe going to deviate a bit from the topic that's on the agenda and more focus on our recommendations moving forward related to the CAP, but also to budget issues, because that's the hot topic at the moment. I think the commitments that a number of our company members have been highlighted by your colleagues earlier from Sci Platform, from OP2B as well. Just a couple of words about me and Food Drink Europe. So I'm leading the work on agriculture and food chain issues there. Food Drink Europe is the organization representing the food and drink industry. So we have members that are national food and drink federations, but also European sector organizations and direct company members. Why this topic is so important for us and why we're asking for coordinated action to support the transition to sustainable farming. It's basically because 70% of what farmers produce in the EU goes into food processing. So we completely rely on the work that farmers are doing. That's a matter of security of supply and the security of businesses overall. That matter, of course, then where our members are fully committed to support and work together with actors in the supply chain and farmers more specifically to address these common challenges. The issue that we've discussed today a lot is the fact that the transition comes with costs, high costs. Last year we did an economic analysis of how much it would cost us to transition the whole Europe, whole farms to sustainable agriculture. Not regenerative as such, but sustainable. And for us in that report, sustainable meant healthy soils, basically. And that led to the conclusion of 28 to 35 billion euros, and that's only for the first year of the transition. Of course, we have a number of funds already available, the CAP, also the private sector, banks already providing a number of solutions there. But that's not enough today, and without strong support, then transitioning becomes impossible, basically. So I had 5 minutes. I'll do 5 recommendations very quickly. The first one being on the CAP, because I think the panel here is CAP and beyond. So first CAP, what we think is that the CAP needs to better support outcome-based approaches. Farmers should be rewarded for the ecosystem services they deliver, that's carbon sequestration, healthier soils, as discussed earlier, water resilience, for instance. And that's through measuring the impacts. In recent conversations, we heard a lot about sustainability benchmarking, so really aligning indicators on what sustainability is, and so that both public and private actors can scale up initiatives and move towards the same direction. Second recommendation is around scaling up financial tools. We have a number of them in the CAP, eco schemes, rural development programs. That's a good starting point. But obviously, we do need more mechanisms and more instruments there to finance the transition. In the strategic dialogue for the future of agriculture, we recommended Just Transition Fund, for instance. But the European Investment Bank is also quite involved in the sector. So that's also part of the puzzle that would help transitioning. So we really need a diverse mix of instruments to bridge the short-term investment gaps that we have. Third recommendations is budget. I don't know why I put it third, because now it becomes first, actually. We're super concerned with recent discussions around this single fund, having the CAP under it, having member states have more flexibility on where they would attribute budgets. Well, that goes completely against the recommendations we have in the strategic dialogue that said that we need a dedicated and increased CAP budget. And that we need also, with the CAP budget, separate instruments to transition and ensure nature restoration as well. So quite worried that these new ideas would create a fragmentation, complexity, while we all talk about simplification lately, but well, so that's a big issue. Fourth recommendations is about encouraging more collaborative approaches in the supply chain. We heard a few earlier on around landscape approach. That includes, for example, longer-term contracts within actors of the value chain between farmers and food processors, for instance, cost-sharing agreements between farmers and downstream actors. That's already being tested and approved all over Europe, but we need to scale up all these different initiatives that allow for cost-sharing and co-investments in the transition. Finally, I would make a point around the knowledge transfer and innovation. That's also something that needs more enablers. There is a lack of technical support overall. There is a number of tools within the CAP that should be accelerated, strengthened, thinking about precision agriculture, but also regulatory simplification around new technologies. So I'll conclude there super quickly, also saying that, because that's been mentioned by Mathieu from ECVC earlier that we need to coordinate policies as well, not have a policy for farmers and then another one for food companies and another one for retailers and others for consumers. We really need to align forces there and make sure that policies, regulations and tools are made for the agri-food chain and are adapted to the reality of our sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Lena. I think it was very succinct and concise and very clear. 5, I think maybe 6 very clear recommendations when we add in the coordination of the policies. And the next speaker is, I don't know whether he says Ivan or Ivan. Ivan Ivanov. Political Secretary, Agriculture Sector in the European Federation of Food, Agriculture and Tourism Trade Unions. So over to you, Ivan.
Yes, thanks a lot, Chair, and thanks also for having me here. I will present the perspective of agricultural workers, and I think it's also important to listen to the voice of workers in this discussion, because eventually also in any kind of transformation, also the workers will be the ones alongside with farmers to apply the let's say the sustainable practices on the ground. And let me start with that. My federation is, generally speaking, has been always in favor of the transition, because we see this is also a part of it's a question of job security, to preserve the natural resources in good condition, in good health, but also on the side of chemical inputs. Sustainable agricultural practices mean less inputs, less reduced toxicity, which also have a positive impact on the health and safety of workers applying and handling those products. But at the same time, and this is also the main message I would like to convey, any transition in the sector, and I'm speaking about sustainable agriculture, but with that I also mean regenerative, but not exclusively regenerative agriculture, needs to have also the social acceptance of the actors, which will be, let's say, the main, which will apply also this transition on the ground. That's why my federation has been very quite extensively working on the concept of just transition. And this is a concept of, or a set of political recommendations which we developed in the past years, where we basically say this transition, in order to be successful, needs to fulfill certain criteria, certain conditions. First of all, we need to be aware of the economic and social impact of the transition in the sector. We have to have a socio-economic impact assessment of the transition, as granular as possible, and as also broke down to the regional level, and taking into account also the regional specificities of the sector. Our perspective is more on the employment side, what this transition will encounter in terms of implications on jobs, in terms of job security, but also how the job profiles will change. And we need this information in order to be able also to manage, to anticipate the change, but also to manage jointly this transition. And this is also the second main political recommendation which we have under this just transition framework, and it's linked to the governance of the transition. So we need, especially when we talk about social aspects, and I mean in particular labor aspect, employment aspects, we need to involve very closely the social partners, trade unions on the side of workers, but also employer associations on the side of entrepreneurs, and jointly to deploy social dialogue and collective bargaining to see how we can anticipate the change in the sector and how we can jointly manage this change. Besides the governance part and the impact assessment, which are let's say the main recommendations which we have under this just transition political framework which we developed, we need also, we acknowledge that this transition will come at with some costs, so and which will have also impact, let's say, on the productivity in the sector. So it needs to have also some financial support, which we need to accompany this transition. And we as a trade union federation, we're not opposing having support, also public support, going to companies willing to embrace this transition, but we clearly say that we don't need to be. There need to be also some conditions attached to that, social conditionalities. I mean, the public support, especially when we talk about public money, taxpayers' money. This support, this financial aid needs to be linked, tied to social conditionalities, meaning it needs to go to economic operators who respect workers' rights. And also individual, but also collective fundamental rights, like the right to organize, to collectively negotiate, and this is the condition to receive this financial aid. Secondly, we acknowledge also that this transition will require also that we upskill the workforce, so they are also well prepared, let's say, for the future jobs and how the job profiles change, so they can also take up the new tasks and responsibilities. And for that, we need to heavily invest in training and upskilling of the workforce, and make it by providing also as inclusive and as accessible framework as possible, so we can also motivate workers to participate in that, and linked it also to clear career advancement. So there's also incentives on the side of workers with acquiring better positions, higher paid jobs, with this let's say upskilling initiative. And last but not least, this was more let's say what we think will fall under the Just Transition framework, which is also important to be considered and taken into account when we talk of any kind of transition, in order to be socially acceptable. And when we come to the Common Agricultural Policy as the main policy framework in the sector, I think it's important to have this concept of just transition, and the recommendations there also at some point included into the framework of the Common Agricultural Policy. And for that, I think it's important, first of all, to have a strong social dimension in the Common Agricultural Policy. I mean, with the latest revision, we already made a very important first step in that direction with the social conditionality, but also with other social elements like the farm advisory services, training for workers, and in certain sectors, but also we need a dedicated budget. And I will join also my colleagues, the other stakeholders here from the farming and for the food community, in saying that in order to have this strong social dimension, we need also a dedicated CEP, and also dedicated and increased CEP budget. And I would like to end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan. When you talked about upskilling there, anytime I hear of that, I always think of my own father, and he used to say that there is only one thing worse than not investing in upskilling your workers and they to leave you, and that's not to invest in upskilling your workers and to stay with you. So it is very important what you say. Our final speaker is Anna Rocca, and she's a director with the EU's Agri and Forestry-related policies in the European Landowners Organisation. So, Anna, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to give some views from the European landowners. We represent farmers, foresters, and also owners that do conservation. And more often than not, they combine the three activities. I'll probably repeat some of the stuff that was said today, which I'm sure doesn't come as a surprise. Starting with the idea of regenerative agriculture, not a new idea, and also something that we support. But like Oana said, indeed, there's some commonality with a lot of our other approaches to sustainable agriculture. We did in 2020 a study with IUCN that actually compared a lot of the approaches to sustainable agriculture that are out there. Oana mentioned a few. Eric Matheus mentioned also some additional ones like ecological intensification, sustainable intensification this morning. The list was longer. But what was nice to see, it was the commonality. That was when you actually look into the practices that they were listing as supporting those approaches. There was a lot of common ground, and a lot of common ground that has been already supporting with the CEP. So that was good to say. It was good to see. Nonetheless, a good part of the regenerative agriculture approach is the focus on soil. Indeed, we see that we're looking now at ideas for the future of the CEP, and we're thinking of also ways of going beyond the more technical simplification that the Commission has been working on, and also see the potential of using soil and how centered soil is for land managers and landowners, and also the fact that by having healthy soils, you also have improvements on water, on air, on biodiversity. And we're looking at it in a way to simplify beyond the technical simplification that the Commission is approaching. And we see this as potentially a good way of basing on soils and all the information we have on soils that we could probably replace all the conditionality. So the ideas that we are currently considering, and when regenerative agriculture actually plays an important role. And also Megan this morning mentioned, reducing indicators like soil cover, photosynthesis. So this type of ideas that we've been thinking about. Another important point, and again, I will repeat myself, but indeed, budget is key, right? And we see a lot of pressure coming with MFF discussions. Indeed, I'll repeat the idea that we should be out, agriculture should be out of this single plan approach. Also, because we did already the work, this idea of having more performance-based and more strategic, we already did the work in the past. So adding to all the rest just seems to overcomplicate for not much of added value. Also, for other priorities, is mostly a member state with the Commission helping with the coordination. With agriculture, no. Agriculture, EU has the responsibility, and that they should keep in mind that yes, they shouldn't dismiss this important role. So yes, in a way, repeating some of what was mentioned. Not only there is the MFF discussion, but we also saw in the vision that the Commission is already preparing, it seems, the way for budget pressures, not only with targeting issues, and there our biggest concern is that we shouldn't dismiss the role of viable farms, right? That should be the center approach. If we actually want to move ahead, the viability is the main aspect here. But also the Commission proposes ideas of new incentives for carbon farming and nature credits, which also Alan Matheus mentioned. It was a bit reticent on how far this could actually pay farmers because of the massive costs of MRV. Indeed, we have a tendency to agree with it. Currently, the discussions are now going in the right direction. We see that there's an attempt to reach for the stars and not being sufficient, practical or realistic. And this is really frustrating because we've been pushing for more payment for ecosystem services since forever. Carbon seemed to be a good way to start because it was only one factor, seemed to be more realistic. There was already work out there. And it is really frustrating to see that we want everything, we want one tool to respond to everything, and we are dismissive of giving it a try and then improve over time. because also the proposal from the Commission allow for that. We can start. There is already a market out there, and then allow for the rules to improve over time. But it doesn't seem to be the approach. There's a lot of push for only public money, because otherwise there's fears of greenwashing. There is a big push to have this AG-ETS, which basically having in setting only. But we know that it's difficult to get proper prices for the food we produce. So I'm not super optimistic that we have proper prices for all the rest. So yes, this is frustrating, and having the Commission presenting these ideas of carbon farming and nature credits as an alternative to compensate the reduction of the CEP is just not realistic. It's just not serious. There was also mention of the role of more the sustainable approaches and also the diversification of farming to improve resilience and therefore reduce the costs of risks, of risk tools. Yes, potentially there is true. There is potentially lower risks here. But we still have a European farming sector that is relatively small in comparison with our main competitors. So yes, some sectors, some farms can indeed consider, the risk mitigation as a viable way, but not the majority of farms. So also here, yes, there's a balance to be made. And this balance improves if we focus on viability, but there's still plenty of risks. Probably more than 5 minutes now, right? All the rest for questions and answers part.
Thank you very much, Anna, and I would never make any apologies for repetition. We had an old lecturer in school, and she reckoned that she needed to repeat something 11 times for it to sink in with the students. I think some of us it took a lot more than 11 times, but she was probably talking about the average. But you did, and rightly so, but you weren't the only one that repeated the importance and I suppose the what's the word I'm looking for, the concern around the Commission's early musings about a single fund, and it's. I think it was one of the areas that almost all the speakers touched on. Look, we've had 5 excellent presentations there, and I've no doubt, but they have generated a lot of questions and opinions in your own mind. So I think we'll go straight into that. I think, one of the points that came across to me is not only in this panel, but also in the previous panel, is the huge importance in this area of the need to educate the educators. Because I think if we don't do that, that's so important in any walk of life, but particularly in this area, our educators need to be educated. So it's open to the floor for questions. And look, I'd urge the people to keep them short and concise if possible. I said that mainly because I saw you putting up your hand. Arnold.
Merci, Chair Joe.
Thank you, dear Joe. The world is not black, white or grey, it's diverse. And regenerative agriculture is equally as diverse. We don't jump from a poorly farmed property to a perfect farm overnight. Farmers develop gradually. We recognize the limits of our abilities, and sometimes we recognize our needs. If you're in Belgium or the north of France last year, for example, or the Netherlands, we needed to plough our land, because if we hadn't ploughed, we wouldn't have been able to sow any seeds, and if we hadn't sown any seeds, we wouldn't have harvested anything or earned any money. There are other years, however, where it's easier to grow the crops, and it is possible to labour the land less. I take samples in my land to see the level of the nitrates in the soil. When you do that by hand, the first 25 centimeters, it goes in very easily. And then you hit a layer of land. It doesn't matter how mild the winter has been. You have to really push it down to get the sample out. And this is the sealed area. And so, like I said, farmers develop over time. We till the land less. Often now we sow oilseed rape without having to labour the land. Wheat and corn, maize, can be sown in rows just on the raised part where the land's been tilled. But if you've got 2,000 to 3,000 euros a hectare of investment in your each hectare of your land, you might need to spend 40,000 euros to buy a sowing machine. So there are solutions. You can plant hedges. You can reduce the size of your fields. You've all seen pictures of Ukraine. You've seen that there are trees around the fields. That's because there was an agrarian reform that was done in Ukraine a few years ago, and farmers were encouraged to plant these trees in order to act as a windbreak and limit erosion.
Thank you very much, Arnold. Now we've had 6 speakers. So can we open the floor to questions? Any questions? Andreas, sorry.
Thank you, Joe. 2 questions from my side. Now we heard from Oana and from Anna, actually. Regenerative agriculture is nothing new. So what do you think about our opinion in putting this term or this form of agriculture that much in the focus or in the center on the way towards sustainable agriculture? What were your thinkings at the first, when you first were approached for a contribution to this work of the study group? And the second question, some of you referred to we should better look towards more result-based and outcome-oriented policy making policies. Now, this is a bit a tricky part. If we take let's say targets to increase biodiversity or to increase carbon sequestration. Now there are so many different factors which have an impact whether this target can be achieved or not. Climate change, just one example. So the impacts are beyond actually what the farmer can control. And then it's also the question about, well, now we are talking simplification and less bureaucracy, and how are outcome-based approaches in line with this? How can you bring this in line with the target of it should be simpler and leaner and less bureaucratic? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, starting with why regenerative agriculture, right? Yes, we're not reinventing the wheel. That's for sure. A lot of it, it's, as I said, you can see in other approaches. But sometimes it's good to remind ourselves that to go back to basics. And there are still 2 concepts in regenerative agriculture that we like. And we don't mind promoting, because indeed, even if there's often a kind of a different timing between farmers and policymakers, right? So farmers indeed require a bit more time to be convinced to change, while us, oh, it didn't work with this word, we invent another one, even if we're talking about the same thing. But on regenerative ag, the two things that we like is the integrated approach, which, again, nothing new, but good to repeat ourselves, right? And in a way go back to basics, and the soil part. So those were the two aspects that we think, yes, they're not totally new, but it's good they are back in fashion, let's say. On the outcome part, well, I didn't mention it per se because indeed it's easier said than done. Result-based approaches is indeed a good aspiration, but if we're far from being able to rely only on them, we need a combination of measure and result. Even if, again, we should invest into trying to get a more outcome, and we saw that also with the carbon farming methodologies, right? That even there is also a combination of, but when the advantage of looking into soil, and that's where the simplification comes more rather than just, result-based type, is that there is already approach indicators like, yes, you have already some maps in terms of the agronomic quality of soils. This for it to be practical, we will have to look in not only at the maps that exist, but also have averages at regional level, because again, there are a lot of differences in soil. So we're looking into those existing databases, and now we could have a setup that would be practical. Knowing that, as you said, outcome-based needs to be simplified for it to actually be a simple approach. I hope it was clear. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Una?
Yeah, maybe a very short point. So, yeah, you have asked if it's a good approach or to put it in front. If you want to put it in front, you need to create a definition. If you put a definition, you lose maybe the flexibility and the fact that you need tools that needs to be adapted at the local level. As I mentioned in my intervention, this needs to be part of the toolbox, but if we look for a simplification in the future, we do not need to maybe come up with too many new terms. But it is, and it should be part of the toolbox in the future. It is already used, maybe defined in different ways in different parts of Europe, and this should continue to be like this. But put it in front depends what you mean by that. But as I stress, currently it doesn't fit to the way how the CAP it is conceived, and also how the member states are working. So we need to promote a toolbox of sustainability practices, and this could be one of them, but not the only one. Thank you.
I have a similar question as Andrea said. You said regenerating agriculture is nothing new. The problem which was described today and which could be solved, or maybe solved, whatever, by this form of agriculture still exists. So my question to those who are saying that's nothing new is, how would you like to address that problem? For example, soil problem, erosion and all this stuff. What was not efficient enough in the past, so that now a new form of agriculture is coming up and said we have the solution here. How do you deal with that problem?
Okay, Lena, we'll go to Lena first and then Anna, okay? Or Matthew first and then Anna.
Je pense qu'on a déjà beaucoup.
I think we have a lot of tools in the Common Agricultural Policy to address this question of the soils. Now, the solutions are not all perfect. They're not all very well adapted. But I think that the real issue is that we don't have, the farmers aren't given enough resources to be able to make the transition. If I take my own farm's example, I farm an area where no farmers are able to access resources to make these transitions, to preserve the soils, to reduce their use of pesticides or chemical fertilizers, because these are risky measures and you're changing the way you farm. And in many regions, it's impossible to access funding from the Common Agricultural Policy to remunerate these processes. And this is because there's a lack of budget dedicated to these tools. Now I'm talking about agro-environmental and climate-related resources, because we put too much money on uncoupled payments because there isn't enough income for farmers. The markets don't pay enough, so we support the farmers with this funding from the Common Agricultural Policy. But what we need is to have prices paid for the goods that we produce that would then allow the Common Agricultural Policy budget to be used to finance these transitional measures. And then we would be able to improve the soils, for example.
Tough question. But, indeed, I would say the main factor is economics, a bit what you are referring. Because even if most farmers are aware of the problems, and we also have seen within the evolution of the CEP that it's been already for a long time that this only production part, as it was back in the day, it changed a long time ago. But farmers still need to deal with difficult circumstances. The economics are not rosy at all, and that's why we also see the as you mentioned before, number of farmers decreasing, which is a normal part, as we've seen in other parts of the world. We see that agriculture indeed slows down this structural change, but the structural change is still there, and there's still an economic problem. What we're trying to do is also convincing farmers that, you know, if you do it this way, there's win-win. Yes, that you might lose some profitability in some years, which is the transition years, but they're still it's still okay after that period. Farmers still need to convince, because again the circumstances are different in different parts. So that's why it's important to have a big toolbox. Also because the challenges are increasing too. So yes, we know what is the best approaches, but then there is reality, and especially the economics of farms, making it sometimes difficult for a farmer, even with the right mindset, which was also one of the key issues, even with independent advice. But sometimes, like, will I be able to sustain the costs, the next years? So economics being the biggest problem here.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, look, we've run out of time. I know we'd have a lot more questions, but I have to give time to Stoyan to sum up. Look, it was a great panel. I think, we started off talking about the demographics of agriculture, the age, the lower income that we're getting, and there was a point mentioned which I thought might be taken up, that we need to rethink EU trade policy. We also got the 5 or 6 areas from Lena, and the other point that you mentioned, Lena, was that the cost. You gave a figure of 28 to 35 billion for a single year if we were to take the whole of the EU, I think, and transfer it. That's give or take between 8 and 9% of the total CAP budget from 2021 to 2027. So we also had, look, Ivan talked about, that we need to be aware of the economic impact of transition and its impact on employment and job security. And Anna talked then, as well as, there was a lot of, I won't say, not from Anna, from everyone, the concern in relation to the single fund. And I think that's an area that we need to be very careful of. I think the CAP has served European farmers and European consumers especially very well. It has been incredibly successful in relation to ensuring an adequate amount of safe, top quality food at affordable prices. So I will leave it at that, and I will hand over to Stein, but I just want maybe to show your appreciation for the panel of speakers here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Joe. I'll pick it up when you left. First of all, thank you very much for all the speakers. I have 2 minutes and my speech is going to be in between you and your lunch, so I know it's going to be fast. Well, what are we doing here? Actually, we are official European institution, right? Our committee is supposed to reflect, to mirror what is happening in the society through our organizations that we are representing here. So I'm really grateful that we have all these organizations coming here or participating and showing what they think about the regenerative agriculture, because they come up with some papers. It's nothing new. Nobody say we are going to invent the wheel, but we're going to come up with a paper coming from an official European institution, and that's the difference. So I know everybody has their own vision. Some of them are more progressive, because approaching an old problem to a new approach, it's progressive. Keeping the status quo and just putting the brakes in the wheel and saying, no, we're going to do business as usual, it's not progressive. So let's make clear. Of course, we need to reflect all this in our opinion, but we need to try to find another let's say, solution for what's the big elephant in the room. And we as farmers, me myself as a farmer and our organization, we are completely aware what is the big problem. It's not only in Bulgaria, but only in Spain, in Italy, everywhere, in south of France, etc., etc. So we need to take care of our biggest assets, and that's the soil, because that's the biggest asset in every farmer. And we need to make sure that we're going to transfer these biggest assets to the next generation. One thing that really struck me by participating in many events related to the agriculture, regenerative agriculture, I was almost the oldest one all the time. So all the young people are actually working and thinking in this direction. Not how to preserve the status quo, no, how to have a future. And I believe there is a future in the regenerative agriculture. Thank you very much.
On se retrouve à 14h30.
We'll be back at 2:30.
Past 2 in the afternoon.